Okay, thank you for everyone for being here. Want to remind everyone to silence their cell phone. Otherwise, you're going to be very embarrassed if someone tries to call you during the meeting. We will begin with a roll call. Ashley, would you please do that for us?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. For the Select Committee on School Finance Recalibration, October 28th, 2025, Senator Beitman. Here. Senator Brennan. Here. Senator McEwen. Here. Senator Rothfuss. Here. Senator Schuler. Representative Andrew. Here. Representative Bear.
Here.
Representative Kelly.
Here.
Representative Nyman.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Good morning. Here.
Co-Chairman Salazar.
Here.
And Co-Chairman Heiner.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. We will begin with an invocation. Representative Bear will give us that invocation, and then we'll have a Pledge of Allegiance led by Senator Schuler. Would you please stand? Thank you. Members of the committee and public, we are excited for another meeting of our recalibration committee. This has been a heavy lift, and for many of us, this is one of the most difficult committees we've been on. As you can see by my binder, the amount of material that we've received and tried to assimilate and understand has been immense. I always thought the IRS tax codes were difficult. I have a greater appreciation for our school funding model now after these few months. So I appreciate what all y'all live with on a day-to-day basis as you strive to understand all that goes into this. So our agenda today are two very important topics, that being salaries and the regional cost adjustment. So we plan on dealing with those. Today we will have public testimony after we have the presentation on salary, and then we will have public testimony again after the regional cost adjustment. But I might caution everyone, don't duplicate what's being already said. We have a lot of people that want to have their voices heard, so we don't need to hear the same thing over and over again. We are here to hear things that we're not aware of, that will help our deliberation as we come up with a bill for our recalibration efforts for the upcoming session. But time is of the essence. So with that, Dr. Pikus, would you bring your team up, and we'll start with Dr. Pikus, and then you can introduce those that are with you.
This says the light doesn't work, so we'll make sure it's working and we're good. Good morning. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank all of you. As you know, I had a enjoyable 2 weeks driving across the state of Wyoming recently. My wife pointed out as I left yesterday morning that I've spent more time in Wyoming than in Los Angeles this month. So I think that's probably, from your perspective, a good thing. I enjoyed myself very much. We did 4 professional judgment panels. We also did a listening session in Sheridan, and I met with 8 of you individually. In some instances, a couple members of our team were there. So I want to thank you all for this. your book explains it all. I think it's a lot of hard work, and we know how hard it is. This is my fifth recalibration, and I worked with MAP before, so I know what it all takes. We're very pleased to be here today and share what's going on. I'm going to mostly get out of the way, but I wanted to just introduce everybody who's here with us and what's going on. I want to first introduce Dr. Chris Stoddard, who will do the presentation on salaries. And then after that, Professor and Dr. Lori Taylor, who will do the presentation on the ECA and the RCA. Also with us, and you've met them before, Dr. Amanda Brown with APA, and she will help with tomorrow's presentation on many of the issues we'll talk about. And Mike Griffith, who at this point is an independent consultant working with us and more knowledgeable about how school finance things work in states than anybody else I know. So if there's questions about how other states do it, we'll just defer to him. And with that, I really will let you all get down to business. I'm gonna go sit back in the stand there and let Dr. Stoddard proceed. So thank you very much. And again, thank you for your hospitality. I drove 1,600 miles. I saw a whole bunch of schools, saw a lot of educators, and had overall just an excellent time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pikus. No offense intended, but I would rather spend a month in Wyoming driving around than being in Los Angeles during this.
Mr. Co-Chair, I understand that. The problem is, and I dodged it in those 2 weeks, this white stuff keeps coming out of the sky sometimes. And I'd rather spend those months in Hawaii where it never happens.
Well, someday maybe you could do that. All right, Dr. Stoddard, thank you for being here. I understand you had a difficult time getting here, but I'm glad you made it. Okay, looking forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And unlike Larry, I'm enjoying this nice warm weather, being down here from Montana. So, a lot of interesting material here. I've been working on looking at teacher and non-teacher labor markets now since 2005. And I think this is a really important year, this recalibration, where, market conditions, throughout the United States have really changed a lot. And so there's some important things to discuss here. Let's see if I can. So let me start. I've divided my presentation into two parts, and I'm following along the PowerPoint slides that you've been given, and they're projected up there. So the first part, I'll talk a little bit about teacher salaries, what we know about where the market stands right now for teachers, and then I'll turn to the various non-teacher positions in the model. Of course, teacher salaries, it's always important to kind of take a step back and think about, what's the issue here? Labor markets really matter because they affect the quality of teachers, and the body of research looking at teacher quality shows that a high quality teacher makes an enormous difference in the classroom compared to a less skilled teacher. So individuals are thinking about whether or not they want to teach at different stages along their career. So you have new teaching graduates or college students trying to decide, do I want to become a teacher? And where do I want to go when I graduate? Do I want to stay in Wyoming, or do I want to go somewhere else? So we have to think about both teaching occupations relative to other kinds of choices that college student might make, and then comparing conditions in Wyoming for teachers to conditions in other states. And then, of course, existing teachers are continuing to make those decisions about whether or not they want to stay as a teacher or consider another occupation in Wyoming. And so the teacher report compares these different kinds of labor markets, looking at teaching in Wyoming, teaching in other states, and also looking at different occupations that a person might choose. So to put this in context, this first slide is showing where the funding model sits relative to the actual average teaching salaries. So you can see for many years, there were very limited adjustments to the model salaries. And so the model salary for teachers was pretty flat from 2010 all the way up through about 2020. So pretty limited increases in that period. If we look at what districts were actually paying, you can see that districts were paying more than the model salary, and that the gap between the two sort of grew, especially in the post-pandemic period where it rose. Now, in the last couple of years, there have been some larger ECAs, so 4% about, 4.25%. For 2 years, and then the most recent ECA, the 8.5% ECA, we don't know yet how that has been spent by districts. That data will be available, I believe, in December. So that's why you can see 1 year extra there for the model weighted average. You can see that uptick saying that model weighted salaries are projected to increase by about 9% from the latest ECA. It's not clear yet what will happen to actual averages, but likely they'll increase as well. I don't know why my arrows don't want to. So the other way that model salaries differ from actual salaries is that model salaries are pretty compressed across the districts, and that's what this graph shows. So the white bars there, or the kind of clear bars there, are showing that with the exception of Teton County, model salaries, average salaries for teachers are all between 50 and 60,000. So very compressed distribution. The actual averages range much more than that. And so those are the green bars. So this is showing, each bar is showing the percentage of districts in a different kind of pay range. And you can see that all districts, with the exception of Teton, are paying an actual average that's greater than their model salary. Most of them are lying between 60 and 70,000, but you've got some, a little lower and some a little higher than that. So how does Wyoming stack up relative to other states? So the National Education Agency surveys state education agencies up through the 24-25 school year. So some states also report district level data publicly, and where I've been able to collect that data for surrounding states, I've done that for you. This trend is, of course, going to reflect the changing attractiveness of teaching in Wyoming relative to other states. So if we think about kind of the history over the last 10 years, an important thing was that after the 2005 recalibration, we had kind of the Great Recession, which hit a lot of other states' public finances much harder than in Wyoming. And it's really been in the last 5 years, kind of post-pandemic, that we've seen big wage increases in surrounding states where we hadn't seen that so much before. It's also important to note that other states don't have the same kind of finance system with a model salary, so I can't give you this model versus actual comparison for other states. Some states have like a minimum that they set, but they don't have the same kind of system that Wyoming has. So with that in mind, this is plotting in black. You can see the actual salaries in Wyoming, the solid line. The dashed line, which extends a little bit further, those are the model salaries. And then in red, that top line is showing the average US teacher salary. In blue, the lowest line at the beginning of the graph with the triangles, that's showing the average in the states that surround Wyoming, so the adjacent states. So what this graph shows is that up through kind of 2015-16, the actual salary in Wyoming was very close to the actual salary in the United States, and there was a pretty significant premium of about 20% relative to the states in the surrounding area. So Wyoming was very highly paid in comparison to similar states.
Yes. Speaker Nyman, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stoddard, is that all inclusive? That is your salary, your benefits, well, that's just salary based. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Nyman, this is just salary. We don't have comprehensive data on benefits across states for teachers, just to compare like benefits in Wyoming for teachers and benefits in other states. There's another slide where I'll try to say something about benefits of teachers compared to other workers, but this would just be salaries.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So you can also see what we noted before, that the model salaries remained relatively flat for the first part of this period, but model salaries were also above the salaries in adjacent states, all the way up through about 2019-20. And then we start to see model salaries falling below the actual averages in other states, although the average salary paid by districts still remained above the average for other states. So you can see that black solid line is above that blue solid line, but they get quite close when we look at the last couple of years. So this next graph just breaks that out for the different states in the region. So again, this graph is a little noisy here for all of these different states. So the black line again is that average salary for Wyoming, the salary that's paid by districts. The dashed line again is the model salary. And what you can see is in about 2021, that was when Colorado and Utah surpassed Wyoming in terms of the actual average salaries being paid. So those gray and the diamond yellow line exceed the salaries that are being paid in Wyoming on average. You can also see that other states are getting closer. So Montana, we passed your model average a couple of years ago, and now the model average, you know, if we look at it in 2024-25, the model now lies below the salaries that are being paid in all of these other adjacent states. The gap relative to states like Colorado and Utah is about $12,000 now in terms of the difference between the actual average paid in those states and the model. It's about $5,000 if we look at what districts in Wyoming are actually paying relative to Colorado and Utah. That actual, though, that's being paid in Wyoming is still above the actual salary that's being paid in these other states, with the exception, like I said, of Colorado and Utah. So this graph is trying to get at the question of, is there a particular problem at the top? So as I was digging into the data for these other states that report district level salary, I don't have all of the adjacent states. So like Montana, we don't publicly report teacher salary schedules in the same way. So this is just looking at Colorado, Idaho, South Dakota, and Utah. And this is through the 2023-24 school year. So that district level data in these other states also lags a little bit. That first bar all the way on the left is showing that almost all of the states, that lightest bar, almost all of the districts pay between $50,000 and $60,000 in the, the model salary for almost all of the districts is between $50,000 and $60,000. That's the bar on the left. The second bar is showing the fraction of districts that actually pay between $50,000 and $60,000 is less than that, but it's still a sizable chunk. But the majority of districts are paying more than $60,000. If we look at these other states, we can see that these other states have broader distributions. They have a lot more districts that are low paid than in Wyoming. Wyoming still continues to do very well in terms of both the model and actually in terms of not having very many districts with really low pay. You can see, though, that the percentage that are highly paid is beginning to grow in some of these other states. So Utah and Colorado in particular, but also Idaho has a number of districts that are paying more than $60,000. And when we look above $70,000, so in the next graph, that's where we really see kind of an escalation in some of these other states. So Utah's there in green, and the percentage of districts that are paying more than 70,000 is now between, it's about 22% in Utah in the 2023-24 school year, much higher than in Wyoming, where it was less than 5% that were paying that highly. Again, other states looked pretty similar back in 2021, 22, but as we move forward, we can see both Colorado, Idaho, and Utah making really big strides in these very highly paid districts. So states differ in lots of ways other than just salary. So I've put up a couple of comparisons about working conditions. So again, relative to Representative Newman's question, I don't have benefits, but I can say something about class sizes, something about the number of contract days. So a number of states don't have requirements on state contract days. Wyoming obviously has 185 contract days, so 175 days with students, 10 days for teacher in service, other contract days. How does that compare to other states? Relative to other states in the region, that's on the high end. So if we look at Colorado has a low minimum, 160 days. The biggest districts tend to be in that 185, 188 contract days, so similar to Wyoming. Idaho is less, Utah is a little less. All the way on the right, that column is showing the pupil-teacher ratio in these different states. So Wyoming, the pupil-teacher ratio is the lowest in the region. Montana, Nebraska, a little bit close, not so far. But if we look at states like Utah, the pupil-teacher ratio is much bigger. So that gives you some sense of where the teacher labor market in Wyoming sits relative to other states. So again, I would summarize that as saying in the last few years, other states, their labor markets have improved pretty dramatically, particularly if we're looking at some of these relatively high-paid states and relatively high-paid districts. Now, if we turn to a comparison of teaching wages to wages of other professional and technical occupations in Wyoming, here the data is going to lag a little bit. So where does this data come from? So the Bureau of Labor Statistics does surveys of establishments. So these aren't surveys of individuals, these are surveys of businesses. And they classify workers, based on their occupations. So who do we compare teachers to? Well, if I'm thinking about a college student, they're thinking about other kinds of occupations that require a college degree. And so those fall into the classification that the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses that are called professional and technical occupations. So not service, not manufacturing, not ag, but ones that require professional or technical skills. There's also a list that other researchers have developed of comparable occupations. So they've tried to go and look at all the different characteristics of occupations, how much autonomy you have, what are the working conditions like, what kinds of skills are required, and they've identified a few occupations that are most similar to teachers. So those often look like nurses and accountants, HR folks, that have similar kinds of, those are the biggest occupations that are similar to teaching. So I can't adjust those for age, for hours or weeks of work or benefits, though I'll give you some information about that. But these are the most current data that we have. So I have a list of all those different kinds of occupations. I won't run through all of that, but you can see that at the end of the report. It goes through that in quite a bit of detail. So how has the labor market for teachers compared to the labor market for other workers? So this just looks, so again, this is just looking at workers in Wyoming. So the blue line here is the average annual wages for professional and technical occupations. The red line is just showing the average wages for that kind of narrower set of the most comparable occupations, although you can see they're not that different. The black line is again showing the average wages of teachers. This average is coming from that same wage data, that survey of establishments, rather than coming from the Department of Ed's records, just so the data is the most comparable. And then I'm using the model weighted average in there as well. So like we saw before, model weighted wages were pretty constant kind of for the first part of this period. And we can see that there was sort of a steady increase in the average wages of other professional and technical occupations. But that increase really escalated. We all know this, in the post-pandemic period, the labor market got really tight and we've seen a lot of wage inflation. So really from 2021 on, there's significant wage increases in other occupations in Wyoming. That increase has been especially sharp in health occupations and in business. So if we look at, if we pull out health and business, other occupations are kind of tracking teachers more similarly, but health and business occupations, there's been a really rapid escalation. And those are the occupations that college students are largely going to be looking at when they're trying to decide on a career. So this next graph is looking now at just those same numbers, but trying to simplify it by dividing the ratio of teacher wages divided by the wages of non-teachers. And the reason I've done this is so that we can kind of say, how does teacher pay compare in Wyoming to other occupations, and what does that look like in other areas? So the black line is showing that in the very first part of this period, teachers were being paid about 90% of what other non-teachers were being paid in Wyoming, and that was much higher than how teacher pay compared to the annual wages of other workers in the United States or in adjacent states, which are the red and blue lines. If we look at the model wages were about 80% in the beginning of this period. Those have all eroded over time. That's been true in the United States, and in adjacent states, teachers have lost ground relative to other workers in general. The ratio now in other states and in the US is sitting at closer to 70%, but for many years, that ratio was kind of in that 75 to 78%. If we look at what's happened to the model ratio now is much lower. So if we take model salaries relative to the salaries of other workers, the model salaries are about 2/3, about 66%. And that's definitely below where that ratio is in adjacent states and in the US. And you can see that it's really been since 2022 that model salary has fallen behind like that. Now, again, you'll note this data runs up through May of 2024. So it doesn't reflect the most recent ECAs. So I'll show you in a minute some projections trying to kind of give my best guess of where things might sit. This graph is just breaking down those ratios again for all of these different surrounding states. So again, you can see that model ratio in the dashed line. Now it only exceeds the ratio if we're looking at South Dakota and looking at Colorado. In all of these other states, teacher pay relative to the pay of other professionals is much higher. You can see that the average salary paid by districts in comparison to the wages of other workers is pretty similar, is the closest it's been in quite some time to what that ratio looks like in Utah, in Montana, and Idaho. Okay, so trying to project forward, like I said, I knew this committee would be like, well, stopping in May of 2024 isn't that helpful to us. We want to know, what might things look like. So trying to look at the non-teacher labor market in 2025, that occupational data for Wyoming isn't available yet, but we do know something about how average wages have changed. So looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, how much did wages grow between 2024 and 2025? In Wyoming, they grew about 3%. You can see in some of these other states, wage growth in the last year or between 2024 and 2025 was a little bit faster, but in Wyoming, it was about 3.3%. The US also reports that same wage data based on education. So this isn't Wyoming specific, but this is just saying how are college educated workers doing? What we saw after the pandemic was first really rapid wage increases for less skilled workers. Then we saw wage increases for college educated workers kind of catching up. So if you look at 23 to 24, that first column, there was pretty fast wage growth for BAs. At this point, 2024 to 2025, wage growth for all occupation or all education levels has been about 3%. So I'm using a 3% growth rate, both based on Wyoming's wage growth rate and based on the wage growth rate for college educated workers. So 2.8 for college educated workers, 3.3 for Wyoming. I'm calling that 3%. What will it look like between 2025 and 2026? What is it going to look like by May of this year? I don't know, right? I think none of us know. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. So I continued that 3% wage growth. We're still seeing inflation. We're still, the first part of this year, we were seeing a stronger labor market. Will the labor market cool off? There's some signs that maybe it is. How's that look in Wyoming? We don't know. So I'm giving you some projections with that caveat in mind. So if I forecast forward for spring of 2025 and spring of 2026, if I say, okay, suppose that actual teacher wages in Wyoming grow at the same rate as the ECAs that you adopted, and suppose that non-teachers' wages grow at about 3%, that's giving you those shaded bars. So on the left, I'm showing what actual teacher wages relative to these professional and technical workers would be. On the right, I'm showing you the model. So based on that, I would expect that in spring of 2025, so when we get that data, we'll know for sure, that the ratio would have been about 60, almost 67%, assuming districts increased teacher salaries in response to the ECA, it could be as high as 81% this spring. What would that look like for the model? Again, those ratios are a lot lower. That ECA would bring that ratio up to 71%. So what's the right ratio? Well, that comes down to how much do teachers work relative to other professional and technical workers. So teachers work fewer days out of the year than other professional and technical workers. So there are 185 contract days in Wyoming, as I mentioned. How many days do other workers work? Well, we don't have a lot of great Wyoming-specific data on that. The National Compensation Survey surveys private industry workers. They report that private industry workers have between 15 and 20 days of vacation if we're looking at someone with 5 years experience versus 15 years experience. So the number of vacation days increases with years of experience. They get 8 paid holidays. So that would be about 234 days per year for a private sector worker. So if I take the 185 contract days in Wyoming and divide that by the 234 days on average that a private sector worker works, that would say you would expect, making no other adjustments, you would expect that teachers might get paid about 79% of the wages of other workers. Do teachers work fewer hours? Do they work more hours? There are different numbers floating around there about how much do teachers work relative to other workers. So here I looked at the American Community Survey. So this is a mini census that's conducted each year. That data runs up through 2023, but it really hasn't changed that much in terms of hours of work over time. So here I looked at college-educated workers, ones that are past, they've got their BA, so they're at least 22. They're not retired yet or in kind of a retirement phase-out period, so younger than 65. And I looked at people that are working basically a full-time, full-year job. So working at least 35 hours a week, working at least 30 weeks per year. And basically, teachers in Wyoming are reporting nearly identical hours to non-teachers in Wyoming. Teachers in the US, similar. So I didn't make any kind of hours adjustments because it looks like the number of hours worked per week are pretty similar between teachers and non-teachers. It's true that both of them are working more than 40 hours a week, right? So that's true, but it's not that different. So I've just made this weeks of work comparison. When we look at benefits, how do benefits compare? So the next slide, again, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We don't have Wyoming-specific data on benefits for non-teacher occupations, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics, when they survey employers about paid leave, about insurance, about retirement contributions, or other Social Security contributions. They break out teachers. They also report this for management, professional, and related occupations, and they break out registered nurses. So you can see the way the compensation works is a little bit, different, because teachers have a shorter work year. They have a little less paid leave and supplemental pay than, say, a registered nurse does. They have more generous retirement and contributions, somewhat more generous insurance. If we look at the total benefit compensation package for teachers, it's a little bit more than for other management, professional, and related occupations. It's a little less than for registered nurses, but pretty similar. So again, the exact form of compensation varies. Now, again, these are comparing teachers to other professional workers. This is not comparing teachers to service workers or manufacturing, but it's other professional workers. The benefit package is pretty similar. So this next slide is just kind of summarizing then, saying, okay, what if we did that we took that 79% days of work adjusted salary? How does that compare to where salaries are in Wyoming? How does that compare to the model salaries? How does that compare to salaries in other states? So the 79% of wages of professional and technical workers is in blue. The dotted lines at the end are where I've said, okay, we're going to assume that 3% growth rate. We're going to assume that wages increase in districts at the same rate as the ECAs. So that's the blue line. What are districts actually paying? That's in black. And you can see that those are converging, in 2024-25. My projection would be that what districts are actually paying is pretty darn close to about 79% of the average professional and technical worker in the state, which would make sense in terms of a days of work adjustment. If we look at the average teacher salaries in adjacent states, because they don't have the same model, the same kind of ECA, I'm not exactly sure if they also increased about the same way that Wyoming has. There might be a slight premium relative to other states. You can see that kind of narrow gap in the most recent year. And if we look at the model is still significantly below that, even with the ECA. Okay, so that's all just looking at where do salaries sit, what does the market look like. Another way to think about the labor market for teachers is to say, as we've seen kind of this erosion of wages relative to other workers, what's happening in terms of teacher turnover. So this next section of the presentation is looking at recruitment and retention indicators and looking at new hires, where are they coming from, what are their characteristics looking like. So first, let's look at the percentage of new hires. So new hires That represents, recruiting that districts are needing to do. How many people are they having to replace each year? They're replacing them either or adding if they have new positions, if teachers are retiring, or if those teachers are exiting for another reason. A lot of teachers are moving from one district to another, so they're not necessarily exiting Wyoming altogether, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So the percentage of new hires sits right now at about 11%. It hasn't, it's kind of gone up and down over time, but it's sort of hovered around that same percentage. You can see that there has been sort of this steady increase since 2017, but it's not that different from where things were if we look back, 10, 15 years ago. So there has been a steady increase, though, in the last 5 to 7 years in terms of the percentage of new hires. What about, who is it that's leaving? Is it mostly teachers close to retirement, or is it new teachers? And we're particularly concerned about new teachers exiting, because we know that it takes teachers a few years before they hit their stride. So there are pretty big gains to teacher experience in terms of student test scores and all of that in those first 3 years. Those gains continue somewhat beyond that, but they're especially large, as a teacher gains those first few years of experience. So if you see a lot of—
Dr. Stoddard, the percent of new hires in Wyoming as compared to surrounding states or US average, how does that compare?
It's pretty similar. So, we don't have comprehensive data for all states. We do know for Montana and for Utah, a couple of states that report that publicly, and they do range between 10 and 12%, at least for the most recent year. I'm not sure what they looked like a few years back. But in the most recent year, the states that I was able to identify look pretty similar.
Thank you.
One thing that's important to note is Wyoming doesn't track measures of teacher quality in terms of like linking teachers to test scores. So we can't say, is it the teachers whose students are doing the best that are the most likely to stay, or are they the most likely to leave? Obviously, if we have someone who tries out being teaching and discovers they're terrible at it, we'd love them to leave and be replaced by a higher quality teacher. So turnover isn't in and of itself a bad thing. But I can't say, is it your best teachers that are leaving or not? So this is looking at those exit rates now by experience. You can see that the exit rate, of course, for teachers that are 60 and older is much higher than for others, and that bounces around somewhat. You can see in the orange line, the turnover for new teachers, so teachers with 0 to 3 years experience is kind of the next highest. It sits at about 15% right now. There has been, again, a very modest increase, but not a really large increase. If we look at more experienced teachers, so the gray line on the bottom is teachers who have 4 to 20 years experience. Again, beginning in kind of 2019-20, there has been an increase in turnover for that group, but it's been pretty modest. And that turnover rate right now is about 9%. If we look at the percentage of new hire, did I show you this already? Yes, okay, sorry, repeated that. So we're looking at new hires. Are these new hires coming in from other states? Are they brand new? Are they switching Wyoming districts? That's what this graph is showing. So about half of a new hire from a district's perspective, they're hiring someone new in their position. And by new, I mean they didn't teach the previous year. They might have taught 3 years ago. They might have taught 2 years ago, and then, were out for maternity leave or something. But about 50% of them have no teaching experience anywhere. You can see the dotted wedge above that are teachers that are being recruited in from other states. Just above that are the teachers that are switching Wyoming districts, and then above that are teachers who had previous experience in Wyoming but weren't working in the previous year. So a fair number, almost half of new hires, have taught before, but we don't see a lot of change in terms of, have there been like lots of inexperienced teachers or lots of teachers that don't have any experience that are being hired now? I mean, that really hasn't changed that much in this period. This is looking at, of those new hires, how many of them have a bachelor's degree just in education, so they don't have a subject matter bachelor's degree, which some researchers have found that also influences student outcomes. Again, there hasn't been that much of a change, if anything, kind of an increase, again, sort of since 2019, but not much of a change in terms of the percentage that only have a BA in education. You can see, though, that fraction in Wyoming is higher than it is in neighboring states. So neighboring states are tending to hire more teachers who have subject matter experience. Was there a question? No.
Senator Office, please.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting the graph, then I would have interpreted it the opposite of what you just said with the fraction of Wyoming new BA hires, or is it, that's not an and, that's an or? For the fraction of Wyoming, this is new BA hires, is that only with education?
Correct.
That's what it means, okay.
Yeah, only with education. So there's a lower fraction only with education in other states, meaning they're hiring more teachers that also have a degree in, say, math or science. Does that make sense?
Does it also include those that would be hired with only one degree and that's not education? Or does this have to have a second degree?
I think this is, so that would lump everybody who, so one category is you only have a degree in education and the other is everything else. So either education plus something or something else, not education. Does that answer that question?
Yep, that helps, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Senator Rothfuss.
Any other questions, committee? Please continue, Dr. Stoddard.
All right, the next graph is showing where are the institutions that Wyoming is hiring from. So here so these are now newly minted BAs. So this is someone who got their BA in the last 3 years. So I didn't want to look at any new hire, but they were out of the labor force for 5 years and then they came back to teaching, or they switched districts. This is newly minted BAs. Where did they go to college? So it's kind of that 50% who had no teaching experience, new BA. Where were they going to college between 2015 and 19, those hires? Where are they coming from in the 2020 to 2024 period? About 60% of your new teachers who don't have any teaching experience, recent BAs, they're coming from the University of Wyoming. That hasn't really changed that much over this period. You have a pretty big increase in the percentage that are getting their degrees from Western Governors University and other similarly online programs. You can see at the bottom, if we look at these other kind of bigger state institutions, so BYU, Idaho, University of Northern Colorado, the Montanas, Utah State, Colorado State, those are other kind of major four-year in-person universities. That's gone down a little bit, so 3% less that are being drawn in from these other states. So that's kind of been the shift, has been a little less representation from in-person institutions in other states, a little bit more from these online institutions.
Dr. Stoddard, any idea why more new hires are coming from Western Governors University, whereas others have decreased? What's the change, the reason behind that?
I mean, certainly, so Mr. Chairman, it certainly has been the case that in general in the United States, we've seen an increase in online education in teaching. And in states like Wyoming, where you have a pretty, rural and remote population, one positive way to view that might be maybe you're getting people who have strong ties to the community that are getting their degrees from online institutions rather than, moving and going to the University of Wyoming. My concern would be that there are some questions about the quality of the teacher preparation programs at some of these online institutions. I certainly would let districts, they would have a lot more information than I would about, weighing in on any of these specific institutions. But I think it does speak a little bit to this question of the attractiveness of Wyoming relative to other states.
But you're seeing that same trend in other states from online?
I'm seeing a slight increase, yes, in online education.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this graph, I think is repeating, sorry, some of the information I gave you about the percentage that have a non-education major, and also the other indicator of teacher quality would be the, you know what, I think I misinterpreted the graph that I gave you before. I apologize. Let me go back. This graph here, sorry, I wasn't, so Senator Rothfuss, I need to restate what I was doing here. So this graph is showing what percentage of the new hires are coming from Wyoming, what percentage are coming, got their degree in a neighboring state, and what percentage got their degree in a different state, not a neighboring state, but another state. This graph is showing not much of a change. Here, I apologize, here I'm showing that the fraction of teachers who have a major that's other than education has increased slightly since 2015. The percentage that have a master's degree, that has not changed very much. So I
Yes,
apologize.
Senator's office.
And I was really surprised by the data because this is the trend that I would have expected based on the changes to our College of Education's requirements for higher education where they have to have a dual degree.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
so
I
was a little shocked.
apologize.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That
Thank
makes
you.
sense now.
So we're more clear,
yes, sorry.
more better.
I apologize. Yeah, more better. Yeah, thank you for that question. There's a lot of slides and I got to remember which ones are coming up. So I apologize. All right, so this is looking at the pipeline for teachers now. I know you have other reports that are kind of looking at the pipeline in more detail. So this is just looking at the number of bachelor's degrees in teaching that are being awarded each year from the University of Wyoming. So you can see that that's fallen off in the last couple of years. So it was around 200 bachelor's degrees being awarded in education in 2024, and in 2025, it was closer to 150.
But Dr. Stoddard, the percent still remains at 57% from the University of Wyoming.
Correct.
So that hasn't changed, but the pipeline is drying up. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And one other kind of indicator of, are there going to be significant pressures on teachers in terms of that pipeline? Do we have a lot more positions that need to be filled? This graph is just looking at student enrollment projections. So we have seen a drop in student enrollment in the last couple of years. There aren't more recent National Center of Education Statistics projections. So these are the same projections that I had to use last year because the NCS hasn't reported new data where they're projecting, again, sort of slight declines in student enrollment. But you can see that the actual enrollment has kind of fallen, and given that, if student enrollment continues to fall, that reduces a little bit of the pressure from the pipeline.
Dr. Stoddard, apologize for going backwards a little bit, but that pipeline, the number of students in the University of Wyoming pursuing teaching degrees, Do you think that's indicative of the wages that has steered more pupils away from education, or is it some other factor?
Mr. Chairman, certainly that, I would expect that that would be part of it. I mean, and again, I would say teaching wages relative to other occupations. So as other occupations like nursing have posted these really strong wage gains in the last few years, I would say that's likely to be part of it. I haven't done a survey of students to ask them, why are you or aren't you choosing the degrees that you are? Could be other kinds of conditions in education that are deterring students. We've seen this nationally. We've seen nationally a decline, and as I showed you before, nationally, we've seen a decline in the ratio of teaching wages relative to other occupations, so that doesn't surprise me.
So that was my follow-up question. Are you seeing this in other states where their wages are higher in respect to Wyoming? So it's not solely the wages that are driving this trend.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it's been a combination of things.
What other factors do you think are indicative that's causing that, other than wages?
Mr. Chairman, if I were to speculate a little bit.
And you have a doctor's degree and I don't, so that's why I'm asking for that opinion.
So certainly some of the work that I've done in the past has looked at the labor market for women as a whole. So, if we go back to 1970, I did research that showed that about half of college-educated women were working as a teacher if they were working full-time in 1970. I mean, that has changed tremendously over time. So as those opportunities in other occupations have opened up, the attractiveness of teaching as an occupation where, you have summers off and can align your schedule with your kids, that has, I think, reduced. Beyond that, certainly, many people speak to other things about how teaching as a profession has changed and the pressures on teachers, but certainly there are pressures on other professional and technical workers that have also increased over time. So I can't, say, well, 30% of it's this and 10% of it's that, but.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please continue.
All right, so summarizing then these set of findings here, I was asked to make recommendations for model salaries. Again, I would just kind of say I've always been slightly uncomfortable saying, here's the right salary, because there's a range, and higher salaries, you're going to draw in different kinds of individuals relative to lower ones. What do I see as a defensible model salary at this point? So my recommendation is to set the Wyoming funding model teaching salary to ensure that the weighted average salary, so after you've applied RCAs, that weighted average is about $70,500 for 25-26. So why that number? So one reason for that is that if you take that 79%, so if you take that days of work adjusted salary for professional and technical workers, you assume that wages for professional and technical workers grew at about 3%. 79% of those projected wages would give you that $70,560 number. This is the graph that I showed you before that indicated that. I'll also note that I feel more confident about that number because it lines up with several other kinds of markets. So it's very close to the projected actual salaries of Wyoming districts for 25-26. So the WDE reports that the 24-25 average salary paid by districts was $65,265. If that increased by 8.5%, that was the ECA that you adopted, that would put it at $70,812. So pretty close to that number that I just gave you. So that would allow districts to hire the recommended number of teachers at a wage that's in line with a days of work adjustment for other workers. That would also be competitive with the 2024-25 wages in both Colorado and Utah. So again, I'm giving you a projection for 25-26. Colorado and Utah may see more wage gains. It would put you above what I would expect that average wages would be for all of the other neighboring states. That ratio is pretty generous if we look at it compared to the US ratio. So that US ratio from 2023 to 2020 was about 76, 77%. I'm recommending 79%. Certainly there were states that were, again, that was the US average, there was a range, so that would leave Wyoming as a relatively competitive state in terms of how teacher pay compares to other workers, particularly when we look at kind of pre-pandemic conditions. The other recommendation that I have is that I would feel a lot more comfortable if I could say, here's how salary compares to the number of applicants you're getting. Districts have a really, robust applicant pool. They have they're drawing in high quality teachers. My recommendation is that Wyoming collect systematic data on the number and quality of applicants, ideally in a centralized system. I know Wyoming has collected some of that data in the past, but districts all did it differently. They have 3 elementary positions. Are they reporting the number of applicants for all 3, for each one individually? Do you add it? And it was very difficult to tell. So if there was systematic data in a centralized system, that would also let you say how many people are applying, unique individuals are applying to Wyoming positions overall. How many teachers are there in the whole pool for the state? It would also let you be able to track whether high salaries are leading to more applications from other states. I think it would give, in the future, it would give you the option to more directly measure the salary that you would need to attract sufficient candidates without being dependent on this Bureau of Labor Statistics data that requires forecasting. And requires kind of continual data releases. My other recommendation is that the University of Wyoming and you as a body look at ways to target particularly high ability University of Wyoming students. We know teachers vary in effectiveness. Wyoming doesn't have a system for tracking teacher quality. I know from having looked at this back for a long time, even in the years when teacher salaries were high, the number of majors didn't, immediately go up or down. It didn't respond. So more targeted recruiting may be what's needed to develop that future pipeline. We know the University of Wyoming enrollments are projected to decrease in the future, and so it becomes especially important to have these targeted recruiting. So that concludes my slides on the teacher salaries. I just want to pause and see if there are
any questions? Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In doing the analysis, particularly state-to-state comparison, how were class sizes factored in? Because I understand that, I know university models are often paid on class size, sometimes per pupil. So when we see, we might be comparing apples to oranges when we're comparing Utah to Wyoming if we're talking about significantly smaller versus larger class sizes. So how was that worked into this, just to make sure we're clear on that? And I do have a quick follow-up.
Okay. Dr. Stoddard?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, I'm not sure if I fully tracked your question. Are you asking how class sizes compare across the states? Or were you asking something else?
Mr. Chairman, when we're making a comparison, when we're comparing to the other states, did we factor in or control at all for class size?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kelly, no. So I have, sorry, I'm just scrolling back here to show you class sizes in Wyoming are significantly smaller overall. I will say that part of that I know from Montana is it can be a function particularly small schools. So you have to have a teacher for a classroom, even if the classroom is relatively small. But you're absolutely right that Wyoming has the smallest pupil-teacher ratios of adjacent states. I haven't done anything to kind of say how much should salary be given class size, but I've given you that information so you can kind of weigh that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the research, do you have any insight into how crucial class size is to recruiting and retaining instructors? Because I'd imagine when we're looking at cost of living and a place to find a place to live, a town to live in, salary would rank above whether or not there are going to be 5 or 6 more kids in the classroom.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, there has been research that has looked exactly at that, and your conclusion is exactly right. Salary matters much more than class size. Does class size factor into teachers' decisions? Modestly, but certainly salary is the primary driver. And I would say, Representative, other factors like the relationship with the principal, the degree of autonomy also rank higher than class size.
So as a follow-up to that, Dr. Stoddard, Utah has one of the highest class sizes in the nation, and they pay very well. But do you see the trend in their universities for students going into education dropping like here in Wyoming and some other states?
Mr. Chairman, I have looked a little bit at Utah. I don't have the same degree of ability to get all the information from them. But I certainly could provide you with more detailed data. I know there has been a modest drop. I wouldn't want to speak, off the cuff about how large that drop has been relative to Wyoming.
It would be surprising if their enrollment is going up with class
That's
sizes.
correct. Yeah.
So that would indicate the salary is very important, and the class size, they're willing to tackle that.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that. Yes.
Other questions, committee? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Dr. Stoddard, appreciate this report. I'd actually be interested in pupil-teacher ratio medians instead of just the averages, right? Because you said we have these small schools, they kind of skew the average a little bit. So curious about that. Number 2, if we could go to slide 3 again. So this is just the first one about that gap. So I just want to understand when a district pays teachers on average higher than the model, what is being gutted from the model to do that? So are we gutting other parts of the model, or is it mostly class sizes? How do districts vary on how they can pay teachers more than the model?
Dr. Stoddard?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, so first on the pupil-teacher ratio, I should say, this isn't an average across districts, it's just taking the total number of students divided by the total number of teachers. So it wouldn't be skewed necessarily by outliers. On your second question, and I believe Matt Wilmarth can speak to this more directly because I know, do you want to take that, Matt, or do you want me to?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Yin, the Departments of Education work with the continued review of educational resources in Wyoming, or the CREW report that they name it, has indicated for many years districts hire far fewer teachers than the model allocates. So the summary of that is districts are trading fewer teachers for higher salaries. And we've seen that trend really since the 2005 recalibration, when the model provided substantially more teachers and higher salaries. They still continued with the same number of teachers, just paid them more.
Follow-up, Representative?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Matt, when we up the ECA, for example, are districts responding by trying to just hire more teachers rather than give the existing teachers pay raises?
Matt?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Yin, we have not seen the analysis or the data of that quite yet. We won't have that until next year when that data is finalized. So I would defer to the districts on what they've done with that ECA amount and whether they've hired additional teachers or just paid the current teachers more. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, Matt, if I'm not mistaken, my memory, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, was that the ECA for 2 years was about 4.2%, and that salaries went up 3-ish, so pretty close. And I also know that if you take total compensation for teachers, so number of teachers times their average salary, and compare that to what the model allocates, that it's a little bit less. It's like 95, 97% of what the model allocates. So they're not there's no adjustment from other components of the model.
Follow-up, Representative? Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, another question just popped into my head. We were talking about a 3% raise per year just to tread water against inflation. Healthcare premiums quite often go up faster than the rate of inflation. How do we calculate it as far as compensation if salaries keeping up with inflation, but they're getting larger deductions for their healthcare benefits, they're actually getting a pay cut? Has that been factored into any of the considerations?
Mr. Chairman, I can take that one. In terms of how the state adjusts for healthcare, we tie the K-12 funding model to the state of Wyoming's health insurance premium amounts. So the districts are relying upon the premium amounts within the state of Wyoming's plan as opposed to what their own healthcare plans are. School districts can participate in the state of Wyoming's plan, so there would be some parity if the model's premiums are increased in relation to the state of Wyoming healthcare plans, and that district participates in that healthcare plan, they would see that same increase. There's one school district that does participate in the state's health insurance plan, and that is the Natrona County School District number 1. So they're more reliant upon the state premium rates. Other districts are subject to the market pressures of their own insurance premiums.
Thank you, Mr. Wu.
Quick follow-up, sir.
Yes, follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify then, if they are participating in the state plan, they're protected from those premium increases, but it's kind of a crapshoot otherwise.
Mr. Wilmarth?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Kelly, correct. So if a district participates in the state of Wyoming's health insurance plan, they will experience the same increase in their K-12 funding model allocation as they would experience under the state of Wyoming's plan. If they're not within the state of Wyoming's plan, they're subject to their own insurance plan's premium increases, which may not be the same increase or decrease to the state of Wyoming's plan. I will indicate that the state of Wyoming's health insurance plans are set each calendar year, so beginning of January 1 of each calendar year, and the model looks back to that January 1st date to set its premium rates. So there is a little bit of a lag, about 6 months, in terms of when that change would occur in the funding model. But that's the one caveat. And I kind of spoke to this at the last meeting on terms of there's also a little bit more complexity in terms of the state of Wyoming's plan within the model is a weighted average of the participation of school district employees across their plans. So we look at how many employees are in family plan, compare that to the state of Wyoming's single employees, spouse only, or children. And we compare that and provide a weighted average composite amount within the block grant. So if a district has more single employee participants in their health insurance plans, they may get a little bit larger amount of health insurance, but if they have more family plans than what that weighted average is, they may have a less amount of money. But that participation is a statewide average, not a unique district participation amount.
Follow-up, Representative? All right, thank you, Mr. Wilmarth. Any other questions, committee? Before we go on to the next subsection? Seeing none, Dr. Stoddard?
All right, so now we'll look at non-teaching positions in the Wyoming funding model. Can I get a drink of water? Sorry, I should have brought a water bottle up here with me.
Not talking very much.
Yeah, right? I know. Yeah, we all may need a drink of water. So I'll start with school administration. And I'll point out here, one caveat to looking at non-teachers is some of these occupations, thank you. We start getting into kind of small numbers. So I've done my best to choose categories that are as broad as sort of makes sense when we look at wages outside of education. So let me just start here by showing the Wyoming funding model for 2024-25 for superintendents. Central office administration, so assistant superintendents, business managers, HR directors. Districts have a variety of different positions there that they use. So what I've done is grouped those central office administrators together, but pulled out superintendents. So we have superintendents, these other central office administrators, principals, and assistant principals. So that first column, again, is showing the 2024-25 funding model. The second column is showing what districts on average are actually paying in that year. And then the right column is showing where the funding model sits for 25-26. Again, we don't have the actual average salaries yet, but you can see, you can at least see the comparison. So if we look at superintendents, for example, we see that superintendents on average in 24-25 were being paid about $157,000, which would be more than the funding model, both in that same year and also for 25-26. Central office administrators, in contrast, their average actual salary is somewhat lower than the funding model in those years. If we look at principals,
Dr. Stoddard, could you give some more granularity why the central office administration is lower than the model?
Yeah, Matt, do you have,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is analysis that excludes the superintendent only. And so when you look at these administrative positions, they have a wide range of salary within the state, and they hire more FTE than the model calls for in this area as well. So I think it's similar, maybe a similar trend in that the total dollars available, maybe underneath the central office, are being allocated, but to more positions, kind of opposite of the teachers, where fewer teachers are being hired, but the total dollars are essentially being allocated. And so when we look at this analysis, it's all of these administrator positions, which could range from a lower paid director position to an assistant superintendent position, which has a higher salary in actual dollars.
Thank you, Matt. Question, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any indication, Matt, as to why? I mean, is it due to, paperwork? Just more administration being demanded of the districts? Or, why are we hiring more folks in that area and reducing our numbers of teachers?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that answer. We really have not studied that in-depthly over the past 20 years that I've been involved, so I really don't have an answer. I don't know if it's state reporting or just federal reporting. I don't know.
All right, thank you. Maybe we can phone a friend later on.
We might talk to some districts.
yeah. So who's the relevant, market here? So, so again, turning to that same survey of establishments, I've listed out a bunch of the different management occupations in Wyoming. So the broad category, all management occupations, all sectors are being paid about $112,000. On the right, where the data exists, I listed that average for the state government. So the state government is excluding schools and hospitals. There aren't enough, they're not going to tell you the average salary of the chief executive of your state, so, because there's just one. But chief executives are being paid about $164,000 in Wyoming. Then I've listed out general operations managers, financial managers, and then kind of a grouping of all of these different managers, but excluding the general and operations administrators and school administrators, kind of trying to get at the group that might be the most comparable to sort of these central office staff. The OEWS also reports the average salary of education administrators. So this would be pretty much your school principals, but also any private schools would also show up in that data. So you can see in that data, it's about $107,000, pretty close to the 108 for principals.
Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Ms. Stoddard, is this based on, just so I'm kind of comparing what we had talked about earlier, is this based on the 80%, what you're looking at, or is this just?
This is just telling you the annual salaries here. Yeah. So the days of, the contract days, for administrators varies, depending on whether you're talking about central office staff and administrators versus principals. So in my report, I've given you some of the information about that, but I haven't made any explicit adjustments, letting that be sort of a decision for you all.
Follow up?
So I'm also comparing education administrators. So again, we're thinking largely principals here. In Wyoming, how does Wyoming stack up with other states? So again, this data runs up through May of 2024. So if we look back in 2014, Wyoming was ranked 16 out of the 50 states. That rank has fallen somewhat so that you're at about 23, so kind of in the middle of other states. The funding model salary is of course lower, and that funding model salary would put you at about 43, so kind of 7 up from the bottom relative to other states. And then I've just listed out the salaries for your neighboring states for these education administrators.
Dr. Stoddard, do you have that information for our superintendents from neighboring states?
Mr. Chairman, there's not the same level of detail. So Colorado does report superintendent pay by districts. So I can tell you a little bit about Colorado. But other than that, like Utah groups all administrators, principals, and superintendents all together in the publicly reported data. Many other states don't report administrator salary at all in terms of, at the district level. So I can't speak to that, but we can talk a little bit about.
So speak to Colorado.
Speak to Colorado. Okay, hang on a second. I have a piece of paper where I've written down some of those numbers for you. So, Mr. Chairman, one thing that's a little bit worth noting about Colorado, so their average superintendent salary is for 24-25 was $158,612, so about $159,000. The top salary in Colorado was Denver, obviously an enormous district. There, the superintendent's paid about $375,000. There were 9 districts where in Colorado, again, tend to be large districts that are paid more than $300,000. The lowest paid superintendent in Colorado was making $56,000. That was in a school district of 160 students. So definitely.
Less than the teachers.
Correct. It's very low. It's a very small rural district. Yeah. Colorado has much more salary dispersion than you do, much more spread. There was definitely a very strong relationship between district size and superintendent pay. So my sense is that one challenge in Wyoming is that your your funding model just sets a single superintendent salary, as I understand it, where, neighboring states, there's more of this linkage between size.
Okay, thank you. Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, do you have any numbers on the actual size of those districts, number of students in those districts being overseen by that superintendent?
I do. I don't have that on my piece of paper in front of me, but I have it on my computer, so I'd be happy to provide that
I
to the
would just be
committee.
curious. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at Aurora County, Colorado, you're looking at one point, it was like 65,000 students under one
Correct.
superintendent, but there was also a large breakdown of assistants and administration that went with that. The only helped defray that. So just curious as those numbers in relation to that.
Yeah, correct. I definitely can tell you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Nyman, that when I was looking at the data, there was a very strong relationship between enrollment size and superintendent pay. And again, the average, sitting at about 158,000, that was also pretty close to the median. So, about half of the districts below and about a half above that.
Dr. Stoddard, is that pretty typical to tie the superintendent wages to the enrollment and vary that? Yeah, other states.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would say yes. Different states do it differently. So, I know in Montana, we sort of have this like small school adjustment and larger schools. In more decentralized states like Montana, that's really a conversation between the school board and the superintendent rather than something that's set at the state level. But there tends to be that strong association, yes.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we were to take these different comparison occupations and use that to generate model salaries, again, kind of assuming this 3% wage growth in Wyoming wages, the recommended Wyoming funding model salary for 25-26, if we set superintendent pay relative to chief executives, and I recognize there are certainly differences in those occupations, that would be about a 5% increase relative to what salaries were in 2024-25, what districts were actually paying. I'll note that 24-25 obviously is before the 8.5% ECA. So my expectation would be that model salary would be pretty similar to what districts are actually paying in the 2025-26 school year. But again, we'll know that data a little bit later. It would be about a 23% increase, though, relative to the funding model. So it would set your model salary pretty close to what districts are doing, but it would be an increase relative to your current model. Similar for these other administrators. So if we compare central office administrators to these financial and other managers, the recommended salary of about $125,000, it would be a 6% increase relative to 2024-25. Again, my guess is that model salary would be pretty close to the actual average being paid by districts, but that would mean a pretty significant increase in the model of about 27%. For principals and for...
Excuse me, Representative Nyman.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, just for my own understanding, you're talking about base salary. This has nothing to do with.
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Nyman, this is looking at wages. So
Base wage.
base wages. I'll note, chief executives also have insurance that's paid, and so I can't speak to the other kinds of compensation that other chief executives might receive, but this would be kind of looking at base wages.
Doctor, follow-up? No. Dr. Stoddard, by your testimony, you said the information from surrounding states are very limited on superintendent wages and some of these other categories. So this recommended funding model change in our salary, that's based on what we're actually paying, and it's not based on what surrounding competitive states are paying? So
Yeah,
you have
Mr.
no data from surrounding states. You're just saying, this is what they're paying, this is what we recommend.
Mr. Chairman, I would caveat it slightly. So I would say I based my recommendations on other occupations in Wyoming that I thought were the most similar. It turns out that those other occupations in Wyoming, their salaries for those occupations is pretty close to what districts are actually also doing. So if I look at chief executives in general in Wyoming, they're paid in general about $164,000. That's what I recommend, pay superintendents like other chief executives in Wyoming. That turns out to be pretty darn close to what districts are actually doing. So I didn't recommend that you base it on actual pay, but on the pay of other similar workers in the state. But you know, it would be very close if you chose instead to base it on what districts are actually doing.
So follow up to that, Dr. Stoddard, you mentioned that we don't pay based on enrollment. So as you look at chief executives from different industries, how do you compare that to what responsibilities they have, direct reports and total employees and things like that, where we don't do that in superintendents?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Heiner, I mean, that's an excellent point. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of data about, you know, what I know is what the Bureau of Labor Statistics surveys, take all the chief executives, they're going to average that. They're not reporting individual level data to me. Now, your Department of Workforce Services might be able to access that data at the establishment level and tell you more about that. I can only speak to it in terms of averages.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mental itch just hit me. When we're comparing state to state, we don't have an income tax. The surrounding states, except for South Dakota, do. How is that calculated in of tax rates of anywhere between 4 and 7% off the top?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman and Representative Kelly, so again, here, I'm just looking at Wyoming. So this is Wyoming superintendents compared to other Wyoming chief executives. You're correct, though, when we talk back about teachers. Certainly states also vary in terms of their sales taxes. You know, do we factor that in? I mean, that's an important point to note. What's the overall tax burden?
All right, thank you.
All right, let's see. So the next category are school computer technicians. So again, this is a little bit tricky to identify, you know, who is exactly the right person here. I am making some days of work, providing you with days of work adjustment information. So the first column is looking at the funding model. Again, the next column is looking at what's actually being paid by districts for 24-25. The column on the right is looking at what the funding model would be for 25-26. And school computer technicians, if they're working in the school, they would have the 185 contract days. If they're working for the district, they might be working full year. So that's why I've provided both the annual and the daily contract information. So computer network support specialists in Wyoming as a whole are paid about $68,000, so about $6,000 more than these school computer technicians. So if you were, you know, for the state government, it's a little more, but if these aren't full year positions, then the actual average salary for districts, the daily salary would be higher. So my recommendation is that you think about the funding model in terms of full year versus not full year positions. For the full year positions, my recommendation would be the model salary of $68,516. Which is 20% more than the Wyoming funding model, but 10% more than the actual average, again, you know, prior to the ECA. The next category are supervisory aides. So this one is also a little bit tricky in terms of comparing, you know, apples and oranges when we're looking at other occupations. So supervisory aides, again, it's kind of the same breakdown, showing you the model salary, the actual average. You'll notice that supervisory aides are paid about $7,000 more than the funding model, but they're being paid about, almost $29,000 in 2024-25. So what are the alternative occupations here? So I compared to childcare workers, home health and personal care aides, and nursing assistants. If we look at supervisory aides relative to childcare workers on a daily basis, supervisory aides are paid more, but on an annual basis less, and certainly less than in aide positions in the healthcare setting. So my recommendation is that there be this days of work adjustment, and that the funding model be set at $29,434. So that would be a days of work adjustment based on the average wages for that full set of childcare workers, home health and personal care aides, and nursing assistants. While that is a 25% increase relative to the funding model, it would only be a 2% increase relative to the actual salary. But that's my recommendation based on, using the same kind of methodology. If we look at secretary and clerical staff, again, here, this is a little bit tricky with this kind of days of work adjustment. So central office, school secretaries are working full-time, full year. School clerical staff have 1,600 contract hours, so roughly 40 weeks of work. So if we look across all secretarial and clerical, thank you, positions, they're paid about $35,000 in the model, $43,000 actually. How does that compare? That's less than the office and administrative support occupations, both in all sectors, and also a pretty significant difference relative to state government office and administrative support occupations. If we look at operations and maintenance, so using a similar kind of methodology here, again, we can kind of compare operations and maintenance to other kinds of workers in the state. So the classification that would fall into are these building and grounds cleaning and maintenance occupations. We can also break out maintenance and repair workers who are more skilled, more specialized. I recognize that in school districts, some of the operations and maintenance work is done by contractors, some of it by school employees. So that's another factor to consider when looking at these comparisons. But in general, the wage for maintenance workers is only slightly less, about $52,000 in comparison to maintenance and repair workers. Custodians and groundskeepers, in contrast, are paid significantly more in school districts than other janitors and cleaners. So my recommendation then for these different occupations is that for secretarial and clerical staff, if it's a full year position, that it be paid in line with other secretarial or office and administrative support occupations. Similarly for maintenance workers and janitors and cleaners. You'll notice that for janitors and cleaners, this is the one occupation out of the ones that I've looked at where the pay in school districts was significantly more than the pay outside of school districts. And so using this same methodology then, that funding model salary would actually be a decrease relative to what's currently projected for 25-26. Next, I just look at these different occupations and what the turnover rates have been. So similar to what we did for teachers. Here, turnover is especially important, I think, as an indicator, because it's much easier to move as, say, a janitor and cleaner, for the schools into another similar kind of position in Wyoming than it is for a teacher to switch careers entirely. So what we see here is that the turnover rate for aides is the highest of all of these occupations, and that there's been a pretty significant jump kind of in the post-pandemic period relative to pre. We also see for operations and maintenance staff that there's been kind of a steady increase year over year in that same period. Turnover rates for other occupations have been pretty stable. It's helpful, I think, to put turnover rates in context. So the Department of Workforce Services calculates turnover rates for different industries. So again, if we look back at this graph, most of those turnover rates for kind of the more professional occupations were between 10 and 15%. If we're looking at aides or operations and maintenance, closer to 20%. For education services overall in the state of Wyoming, so that would include schools as well as the University of Wyoming, all of the other colleges, turnover rates are about 13%. What does turnover rate look in general? For all industries in Wyoming, it's about 24%. You can also see that the turnover rates, 2022, 2023, those were both higher than kind of pre-pandemic, across all of Wyoming, and turnover rates in education are lower than they are, in many occupations, with the exception of public administration, which also has similarly low turnover rates.
So Dr. Stoddard, we can look at the turnover rates on teachers, and it's significantly lower than all other industries. So it's not something that's way out of whack with industry.
No, Mr. Chairman, that would be correct. Yeah. So that concludes my presentation on salaries. Happy to take any other questions on the non-teacher positions. But again, in general, my recommendations are just based on trying to identify comparison occupations in Wyoming and setting the model salaries in line with what similar workers in the state are making.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Committee, any questions? Well, take a breath of air. You did well. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to open it up to public testimony. So we will reconvene at 10:30. Jody. All right, thank you. We've only lost a few of our committee members, so we've done pretty well during the break. Now we're going to take up public testimony, and I'm going to surprise a few people in this room. I'm going to call on teachers first. Anyone in the room that are teachers, we would like to hear from you very first. Please state your name for the record and proceed. And thank you for being here.
My name is Kylie McConnell.
Pull it close to you like a rock star.
Am I good? All right.
The light doesn't work. Okay, go
So
ahead.
good? All right. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Kylie McConnell. I'm a second-year teacher and a graduate from University of Wyoming.
Where do you teach?
I teach at Sheridan County School District Number 3.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a few main points that I'd like to make today. One of those being that starting salary should be $70,000 instead of our average salary. In order to get new teachers to come into the state, and we need to acknowledge the fact that our teachers are doing 100% of the job, not 79% of the job. I would like to be clear that at a small school district, such as Sheridan County School District 3, where we have small class sizes, and there was a discussion earlier about having smaller class sizes, should that impact pay? I would like to make it known that at larger districts, teachers, although they do work with larger amounts of students, they also likely have one prep period where if I was a biology teacher at Laramie, for example, I would usually have one section, meaning that I would teach biology 6 times throughout the day. But where I teach right now, in Claremont, I am teaching 6 different preps, so 6 different classes to different levels of students throughout the day. Now, on top of that, I'm investing more hours of my time into ensuring that our students get a proper education. So that looks like to me where I am spending additional time preparing my lessons outside of school hours. So generally I'm spending about 50+ hours a week during the school year and 15 during the summer. So that's generally curriculum planning and making sure that my lessons are well prepared. Unfortunately, I can't do that very much during the school day because during those 6 hours, I'm teaching. And if I'm going to be an effective teacher, I'm going to be up, moving around, working my classroom, making sure that my students have those checks for understanding, making sure that they're learning what I'm intending for them to learn. So my couple of hours, which as of right now, I have about an hour of planning period, is not nearly enough to plan for 6 hours of my day, 6+ hours of my day. So having those additional preparation times of different content areas is extremely important for, I hope you all to recognize. I'm adding an additional amount of time that I am working, and I would expect that the salary would be reflective of that. I would also like to mention the opportunities for recruitment and retention. So for me, as a second-year teacher, I really enjoy working with the students that I'm teaching at right now. However, the long-term impacts for me to be able to live in this area is extremely slim. I am currently renting, and I've got a very kind landlord who is also a teacher, and he understands some of those struggles of new teachers. There's been a lot of discussion about having teachers being able to stay in those communities and to be able to really invest their time for the long term for their students. And with where I'm currently living, our average home is $400,000. For me, with a $48,000 salary, that is not possible. Okay? Even if that was dual income, that would not be possible. The low end, I've kept my marker max of Zillow to be 250,000. And if I do that, my options are still extremely limited if there are any at all. So the opportunity for me to be investing back into my community, wanting to stay where I am and continue to teach becomes more and more difficult because of those salary limits. So I would recommend that we have our starting salary at 70,000 to reflect the work that our teachers are doing, no matter their class sizes and no matter where they live. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start down here and then come this way. Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I used to get 2 prep periods and a lunch, so congrats. I have no idea what that would be like. But I'd like for you to tell the committee and everyone here, why are you a teacher?
Chairman Heiner, thank you, Representative Kelly. I'm a teacher. My dad was a teacher for 30 years. He was an ag teacher, and I got to see the impacts that he made on students. That's one of my dad's favorite things to do, is to talk about his former students and where they are today and the impacts that he was able to make. And I have worked many different jobs before I have landed as an educator. And at the end of the day, I really find meaning and purpose in educating our youth. I value Wyoming and the future of America, and I find it as a responsibility for me to be able to put that back into our future. I want to help our students to actually achieve more and continue to grow.
Thank you. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And more practically related, do you and how much do you spend out of your own pocket to help support teaching in your classroom?
Chairman, can I clarify?
Yes.
Are you talking like materials and things like that, or?
Estimate perhaps how much of your own money you spend to support your own teaching.
So yes, materials and supplies.
Materials, supplies, would you buy for students? Would you buy for yourself?
Okay.
You'll need to know this for IRS too.
Careful. Thank you, Chairman Heiner. I would guess, or I would estimate, last year was my first year teaching. So this is based on 1 year and a lot of growing curriculum and learning through that. So I'm not sure that this would be reflective of all teachers. But last year, I would say that on materials alone, I probably spent at least probably about $500 on materials. I was lucky to be able to have a conversation with my administration prior to be able to get some of the materials that we needed updated. But out of my salary, I would probably say close to $500 for me.
And I have some daughters that are teachers, and I help them with their income taxes. So keep track of that because it comes in handy.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Speaker Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your testimony. One of the issues I've learned as I've had conversations with educators across the state is it's very difficult to get teachers to go to small rural schools. There's little incentive because there's generally not a lot going on there. So there's some other issues that those small schools face in trying to attract teachers to come. Why did you decide on Claremont, Wyoming, of all places? And what was the catalyst that drove that decision? Was it wages? Was it, were you come from a small community? Or, I mean, what drew you to that school and kept you there?
Chairman Heiner, Representative Neiman, thank you for the question. I had no intention of working at a small school. I had the location in mind, so I actually wanted to be somewhere in the Sheridan County area. But beyond that, I didn't know. But I was approached by Mr. Christensen, during the UW Teacher Fair, where we had some conversations about priorities and what I am looking for in a school district and what that would look like for me and how they could accommodate that. So being at a small school district, it was not my first choice. I have grown to love it. I really love working with the students, and I'm lucky to be in a supportive environment. But it would not have been my first choice. However, having been recruited, I think that that really helped me going where I ended up going. I think also seeing the direction that they were, the school district was taking education, it was something that aligned for me. So having those conversations made that more doable. But ultimately, I was looking for location, and so that didn't have as much to do with salary. I was looking for a job in that area.
Very good. That's what I was hoping you would get to. I was curious, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
That's what my curiosity was. Was salary, a large percentage of your decision-making process in going to a more rural area, or was it just the location and there was other extenuating, values that you saw when you went there that drew you to that community? So, thank you. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for accepting that role and staying in a small district. I taught in a very large district, a small district, and then an average-sized district. So I understand and vouch for when you're in a smaller district, you do have more preps. I was wondering, did you find that in that smaller district that you also got some other supervisory additional responsibilities, say like lunch duty? And I mean, could you talk about that a little bit?
Representative Heiner, or Chairman, sorry. Yes, absolutely. That's something that I have learned working at these small school districts, is that you wear so many hats. There are many different roles that you may take, and just in my second year, we have houses in our school district, which is similar to basically staff leaders for each grade level. Okay, so I'm a house leader, which involves working outside of school for things like concession stands or putting on events and activities. So I was basically told that I'm going to be in this position. I lean into it because I appreciate the the ability to lead, but it was something where they would like you to wear this hat today. So that is one. I also am, I do lunch duty as well. That's usually at least once a week. We are expected to help keep score and maybe ref or whatever they may need at volleyball games, basketball games. Those small communities, they need as much help with manpower as they can. And whether that's in the school district or kind of on those fringes of it within student activities, they absolutely expect you to be a part of that. Yeah, thank you.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up to that, I'm glad you talked about housing because I wondered about the housing situation there. I'm not extremely familiar with Claremont, so do you have to drive somewhere for groceries? I mean, I don't know what the nearest town is, so could you talk about that?
Chairman, so we have to, I actually live in Sheridan, so that means that I'm driving 40 miles there and 40 miles back. Many of my coworkers do the same, or will commute from Buffalo. There are a handful of teachers who live in the town of Claremont, and that is district-owned housing. But beyond that, there is very limited options. There's really not a lot that is for sale in the first place. But what there is generally either undeveloped or at a higher price. So
Thank you.
You're left living within Buffalo or Sheridan, which are also very expensive areas.
Representative Yin, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Is it Ms. McConnell?
That's right.
Correct. Thank you. Are you taking the day off to be here?
Chairman?
Ms.
Representative
McConnell?
Heiner? Yeah. Yes, I am.
Well, I very much appreciate you taking the day off to testify in front of us. I'm curious on what yourself and your colleagues do during the summer. So you said you spend about 15 hours a day during the summer on basically school-related work. Do you also look for a second job during that time? Do other teachers do? And do you think that affects the outcome of their teaching work when they're doing that in the summer? And do you think that teachers should be trying to do that? And are there opportunities to do that even in small town Sheridan County?
Chairman Heiner? So for my time in the summer, I would like to clarify that it is, I estimated about 15 hours per week. So most of that time, this most recent summer was spent on curriculum development. So last year I taught 6 different classes, and of those 6 classes, 2 of them are ones that I'm repeating this year. So I had to prepare 4 more classes for my students. So much of that was curriculum development, bringing in lesson planning, gathering materials and information to prepare myself for the beginning of this year. So I would say that a lot of teachers are doing the same, especially at those rural schools where their classes might switch. Even for larger schools, I would hope that many teachers are reflective of their curriculum and are willing to dig back into that and find ways that they can improve, whether that's during the school year or additional hours in the summer. To answer your question about working a summer job, this was the first year that I have not worked a summer job. However, I don't know that that will continue. With the discussion about housing and opportunities to build up firm financial standing and really reinvest in myself as an educator and as a person, I need additional. So that, for most people, does include working some sort of summer job, whether that's related to education or something completely different, may be up to their preferences or what's available. So I know a lot of my coworkers end up with seasonal work because that's what's available during those times. So whether that is, a lot of people work for weed and pest, and they'll spray weeds. I know other folks who will do landscaping, and ultimately it's seasonal positions that are probably meant for college students that is available for those teachers, though there may be some additional expansion on that I'm unaware of. Thank you.
Follow-up, Representative? Representative Nyman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McConnell, what was your base salary? What are you getting paid? And also, second question, do you have any extra duty contracts? Or, I mean, with a small school, you sometimes have opportunity, coaching or whatever. Is that a part of your pay scale? And do other teachers participate in those extra duty contracts? And what would that look like?
Ms.
Chairman?
McConnell?
Thank you. My base salary is $48,000. I have one extra duty contract of $100, where that is assumably covering my additional work for being a house leader, meaning coming to concessions, being outside of the school, applying or holding meetings and anything within that realm. To address your question about other teachers coaching, we currently have, I think,
I might get corrected here in a second, but I currently think we have only one teacher who is actually a coach at our school. Outside of that, it is previous teachers or other people in our community who are stepping into those roles as coaches.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you participate in the insurance and the retirement in your district? Is that part of your wage pay scale?
Ms. McConnell?
Thank you. So it is, we do have options for health insurance and those kinds of coverage, and I think that is something that is very beneficial. So for me, my health insurance where I'm by myself, I'm actually covered by my school district, which is very nice. In addition, I'm losing my train of thought. Can you reference the second half of that question?
No, that's fine. Just curious if you do participate in the health plan with your district and also in your retirement and everything like that. You do take advantage of all those options because we fund that. I mean, as a state, we send that to your district. For every FT, we have there's dollars that are allocated to the districts for certified full-time employees, insurance and retirement. So I'm just curious if you do take advantage of those things.
Chairman, yes. So I do take advantage of all of those opportunities. And in fact, last year, I sat in on a board of us, teachers and support staff who were going over our options for healthcare and reevaluating if we still.
All right. Thank you, Ms. McConnell. Appreciate you traveling down here and taking a day off. I'm grateful for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other teachers in the room? May you be hesitant now after we've spent so much time with the teacher here. Any other teachers in the room? Okay, any parents in the room that are not employed by schools? Any parents? Please come forward. Please state your name and location where you're from.
Chairman Heiner, thank you. My name is Misty Moore. I'm also representing Sheridan School District 3 as a parent.
Please proceed.
I'm a high school graduate at Sheridan 3, Arvada Claremont, a parent of 2 students, and served on the school board there prior as well. I'm a 6th-generation Wyomingite, if people are keeping track of that kind of thing, raised on Powder River, and a University of Wyoming graduate. I was hoping to comment on 2 things. One of them, I got choked up listening to Ms. McConnell, actually, because my daughter is a senior at Arvada Claremont, and Ms. McConnell is her science teacher. I don't know Ms. McConnell that well, a lot more after today, I guess. But my daughter is at a crucial time in her life, obviously, as a senior at Arvada Claremont and trying to decide what she's going to do next. And she has come home with a couple of little sound bites from Ms. McConnell that I have noticed what an impact they have had on her. My senior daughter has a heart for land and animals, and I don't think she realized that science was accessible to her until she spent time with Ms. McConnell. And so even in our tiny little school, my daughter now feels prepared to go out and potentially pursue something in STEM and something that could give back to a place like Wyoming in keeping our open spaces healthy and happy for people. So the 2 things I wanted to comment on mainly was that our teachers are who my kids, when you send your kids off and you're crying and they're 5 and you realize that this is who they're going to be spending the overwhelming majority of their time with is our teachers. And they're also the ones that are going to be creating the culture of their environment for their literally growing brains. So I have a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old. They both go to Arvada Claremont, and as Ms. McConnell was saying, our one science teacher teaches that breadth from 7 all the way through 12 across all of the sciences, as many of our other teachers do. And then they're also creating that culture, that kind of foundation for where they spend so much of their time. They get there at 7:40 and are there all the way through sports. And we have our teachers creating that house culture, that excitement to be there, that support of one another. They see them in between in the classrooms and see them sometimes tearful about whatever drama is going on. And they're just there for these core moments for them. So I don't want to be preaching to the choir. I know you know how crucial they are to our children's growing brains, but just compensating them at the recommended rate that we saw earlier for the modeling, I just think is the best way for us to show them how important they are to my daughters, us parents. The kind of the continuity and consistency for keeping someone like Miss McConnell in our school, and for our students that are coming behind my daughter as she graduates, and kids to start getting inspired about their lives after high school. I think that's really important for our teachers to stick around and feel valued. The second piece, if I may, wanted to comment on just some of the things I heard earlier, is that salary matters more than class size. We have small class sizes in Arvada Claremont, but it sounds like, and I guess I quote Dr. Stoddard, she said class size factors in modestly behind so many other factors, but that teacher salary is really what people are after. And what's happening in our smaller school districts, or I guess many school districts, is that we're trading fewer teachers for higher salaries, and our fewer teachers are doing more, right? So if we were going to wade into a conversation where we were tying potentially teacher salary to enrollment, I think that would send a really upsetting message to our rural schools and to our rural kids who have so much to offer. And I just think we would be signaling, I don't know, I often think about our University of Wyoming and one of our taglines where we say the world needs more cowboys, right? And where are those cowboys and cowgirls coming from? They're coming from our tiny schools where they know the value of hard work and community and, you know, all of the things that we value. Yes, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Any questions for Ms. Moore? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here and participating. Okay, we have about an hour for public testimony before lunch. Can I get a show of hands? How many would like to provide public testimony in the room? Okay, we've got about 9 online. So come and fill the seats. Let's get started. With just 4 or 5, we won't have to limit. I was afraid we were going to have to limit it to 30 seconds apiece, but we'll give you a little bit more time. So please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, and proceed.
I'm Annie Griffin. I'm the superintendent and special ed director of Washakie 2 in Tinsleep. And this is Rachel Castile, my business manager, my right-hand woman. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what's impacting salaries for our teachers in Tinsleep and give you a direct example of what we're seeing. I want to be sure there's clarity around special ed funding before I speak about a situation that many of our districts are finding ourselves in. As a district, we're all reimbursed for the previous year's spending over the next 10 months of the fiscal year for special education. So if a school has a costly residential day placement for a special education student, we have to pay for it and then be reimbursed the following year. A residential placement in our case is 9% of our total operating budget. We are legally obligated under special education law to place a child where they are best served. This is not a choice of efficiency. Part of what I'm asking is that student placements be paid quarterly or monthly instead of waiting for the next year to reimburse. With that background, let me speak about what we're seeing. A survey came out from LSO, and it's this. I'm sure that you've all seen that with which school districts gave raises. And so that survey came out. We didn't give a pay raise. However, we did give an additional $48,000 to take on the increase of insurance, to take that on for our employees instead of pushing it to them. we were in retention rather than recruitment. We had no open positions this past year except for a half-time custodian. The reason we couldn't do both insurance and pay raises was because we needed to set aside $174,000 to pay for the remainder of the school year for a placement, as we're only reimbursed for the amount of time that student was in placement last year. And so when that's not being paid directly for the year of the expense, it's making districts suffer. And so I just want to make sure there's clarity on that. We're grateful for the 30% set aside because we could set aside enough funds for this cost. And my district and others have passed a resolution asking that it be considered to pay out special education costs for students who are placed either in day or residential programs, ideally on a monthly or quarterly basis, rather than the following fiscal year. Some things to note as we move forward. We do ask that the committee refrain from moving to more categorical grants. The majority of you ran on a platform of decreasing governmental oversight. Well, categorical grants are the opposite of that. They put more restrictions and cause us to be less efficient. A direct example is the CTE categorical grant. We received over $28,000 for supplies alone. However, we maximized ESSER funds over the past few opportunities, and we purchased supplies and equipment, and we were able to start a CDL program because of it. So we don't need that money for supplies. We need it to be able to push towards salaries, and that categorical grant made it where.
Superintendent Griffith,
Yes.
we'd like to stay on the salaries topic for this
Okay,
testimony.
sorry. That part does have salaries because we couldn't use those funds for
We-
salaries. Okay. I want to give an example of what a mid-level teacher in 10 Sleep makes. This is a teacher with 7 years' experience and a bachelor's. Her net take-home is $3,615.16 a month. This is a real teacher who has to pay bills, including the cost of inflation that we are all seeing. And this is a teacher who has to work with combined grade levels. So we're trying to really take care of our staff, and we're trying to retain and get good people to come. So one piece, again, is in order for us to be able to fund these salaries, we need help with those special education payments. And so please consider that going forward. We need the model to be as close to cost-based as possible so we can fund these salaries and benefits. We want all of our teachers to be paid appropriately for the work that they do. We want to be able to offer insurance and benefits that help us retain. And when you start to believe that there is fraud, waste, and abuse, remember that Rachel and I are running the school district. We want to give our teachers and our staff everything that we can, and our students as well, obviously. And so we're doing our very best with what we're given. And so we ask that these things are considered as you look at this recalibration. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Representative Bear, would you please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, thank you for being here. You just mentioned something earlier that your district didn't give out the 8.5% raise because you were trying to accommodate increases in insurance premiums. I assume based on the testimony we heard before that your district does not use the state insurance program.
Correct.
We also heard that if you use the state insurance program, the model would accommodate insurance increases. Why has your school district chosen not to do that?
Superintendent Griffith?
We have we're with Wisbate. That's the insurance that we currently hold. We have shopped other options. I don't know if the state option has been shopped. I'm not sure of that.
Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, if we did do this, where you guys would be reimbursed on a monthly basis, how much, you're currently at 30% that you can hold in reserve, what would that change that amount necessary to be able, if you're not having to have that volume of money sitting there for those carrying that for a year? In your mind, what would you see would be a logical reserve if that was being paid out monthly instead of having to be done a year in arrears? Could you reduce it from 30? Could you see a number less because you're not having to carry so much money and pay those?
That depends. I mean, I think that's difficult to answer because I can't speak to what every district needs that 30% for. In this case, we were able to use it for this, and we were very thankful that we had that in reserve. Had we not, we would have had to take out a loan or something like that to be able to cover this cost. And so do I say that it could be reduced? I don't know that. I can't speak for every district in that. for us personally, you never know what's going to come at you. So I'm thankful that 30% was there.
Representative? Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Superintendent Chalk, thank you for being here.
Had another meeting this morning, but she's going to answer the question that Representative Bear just answered.
Get it to work.
The light doesn't come on.
Oh, okay, so it's working.
Trying to cut costs.
There you go. I see that. My name is Sally Wells. I'm the business manager at Carbon 2 in Saratoga. As to your question, Representative Bear, on why we don't participate in the state health insurance, I analyzed that. I've been a business manager for 20 years now, and about 5 years ago, I analyzed the cost difference between, we've been with WEPT for 25 years, and the cost difference between either going self-funded, state insurance, WisBate, or WEP, the state insurance would cost Carbon 2 $500,000 more than what we currently pay for our premiums with WEPT. Because of you have to cover 20-hour employees, we only cover 30-hour employees. That would add another 20 employees to our pool of employees. And then we have to pay an upcharge for retirees that we don't have to pay with WEPT. And then there's another reserve that you have to pay based on your monthly salary, your gross salary. There's another percentage that you have to pay on that. Like I said, it's been about 5 years since I looked at that, so it's not real fresh in my mind. But I would stand for questions.
Representative Bear.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us that testimony on what you found. Have you looked at the issue that I brought up just a moment ago as far as the increases that would come automatically with the state insurance versus if you're doing the same thing that the previous speaker stated, that they had to use the pay raises to cover those increases in premiums? I'm assuming that since the model incorporates the increases at the state insurance company and you're not getting those increases, I mean, there's a differential there. Have you anticipated that over the last 5 years?
Yes, Representative Bear, Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, if I may. The insurance at the state level 7 years ago took a decrease because the legislature decided to fund the overages that the state health was having. And so instead of the premiums rising at the state level, they decreased. That cut the funding at the school district level. Over the last 3 or 4 years, the state health insurance premiums have not risen, while our WEPT or other insurance premiums have risen. Carbon 2 stays very close to the model. Our base salary is $45,000. The model base salary is $44,108. And we did give a small raise, we were paying 100% of premiums for our health insurance premiums. And over the last 3 years, we've backed off and asked the employees to pay 6%, where we pay 94%. We're currently looking at asking employees to pay more in their health insurance premiums as a share so that we can give them raises on their base salary. It'd be a trade-off. They wouldn't put any more money in their pocket. They would be paying whatever raise that we give them in health insurance premiums. Right now, the state health insurance is at an 85-15 share. So the state pays 85% and the employee pays 15%. I think it's 85, or it may be 80-20. I've lost. Matt could probably tell you what it is. Do you know? What the percentage is the state pays for your premiums? Is it 80-20 or 85-15?
Mr. Chairman, it's 82%.
82%, so somewhere in between. So those are things that we've looked at Carbon 2. When you look at our FTEs, according to the model, our FTEs are very close to what the model funds. We don't have ghost employees. We don't have extra employees that we're being funded for. We pay for the employees that we have with the model average, with the model base salary. And talking about recruiting, for salaries, we had, and Mr. Jennings can correct me, but the base salary, the applicants that we had last year for 3 elementary teaching positions at Saratoga Elementary School, we had 30 applications. This year we had 0 for 3 elementary applications. We had to go and recruit aides that we knew had teacher licenses in other schools in our district to come and teach at Saratoga Elementary. So, and Dr. Stoddard talked about the decrease of availability in the pool of teachers coming out and that sort of thing. So that's what you're seeing. And it sure didn't help that we had one of the lowest salaries in the state. I'd stand for more questions.
Follow up?
Follow up, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you do follow the model as far as the salary, and that's, you stated that creates some recruiting issues, but do you advertise that you do 100% reimburse or 100% of the premium versus, I think if you look at the, you look around the marketplace, very few organizations are paying 100% of the premium. So do you use that to market when you're recruiting?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, we no longer pay 100%. We had a couple of years ago, we had to go to 94.6. And we do use that your insurance premium, it costs less with Carbon 2. That's part of the benefits of coming to Carbon 2 is that we pay a higher rate of your insurance premiums. That's a recruitment advantage. To be catty, we have robbed a couple of employees from Carbon 1 because we pay more of the insurance premiums at Carbon 2.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Wells? Seeing none, Superintendent Chalk, do you have anything you want to add?
Teresa Chalk, Superintendent Lincoln 1. I was mostly her moral support to get up here and talk about insurance, but I'll just make a few points. Number one, I agree with the teacher from Sheridan 3. The base should be 70, not the average weighted. And back to this sheet of people not giving 8.5% raises, just remember 44 of 48 districts were already paying more than $49,400. We went from $55,000 to $55,500. Which means we're paying 21% more for a base salary than we receive. That being said, I realize it's a block grant, love the block grant, and that's how we do what we do. Please keep the block grant. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Superintendent Chalk? Senator Schuler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Superintendent, I know that, because you're over in my neck of the woods, so I know you pay more. I've been kind of looking around the whole Southwest Wyoming. How about your insurance premium? So
we charge $200 for family, $100 for single. I have no idea what that equates to percent-wise. Kim might, but 98%.
Okay. How do you compare with some of the other districts, Southwest?
In Southwest Wyoming, I know that we're pretty comparable for what we charge for insurance. There's, I think maybe one district that still pays 100% of insurance and they have a lower base salary than we do. But a larger district like Rock Springs or Evanston, I know the larger you are, it seems to be the higher insurance rates you pay. I'll just give an example. My son is a teacher and I think he pays $96 every 2 weeks for his insurance as a single employee.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank
you
you
for being here. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for letting me speak today. I am Bo Fulton from Park County School District Number 1. I am on the Board of Trustees. I also have 2 kids in the district. The only piece, and I'll be real brief because everybody else has kind of spoke to it, but I think that $70,000, $70,560 or whatever, is a pretty accurate thing for our community. I'm certainly not an expert in everybody else's community, but our community is fairly expensive to live in. And with that, it has been hard. I'm in my 3rd year on the board. Talking to previous board members and our superintendent, business manager, they used to have 30, 50 applicants. Now, sometimes it's in the single digits. And just being in business in the town, it is very difficult to be able to afford housing there, cost of living, I mean, just the whole breadth. So I think that $70,000 with the experience component, that's the other thing, we do value experience. And so we would like to be able to commend those teachers for staying with us and be able to offer steps and lanes. We've been fairly fortunate in the sense that since I've been on the board, we have been able to. So, and I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Yes, Chair Heiner, Scott Stoltz, Superintendent, District 2 in Sheridan. I want to speak specifically to numbers of candidates that we've had in our pool. Sheridan has been pretty fortunate regarding the opportunity to recruit and retrain teachers. Actually, 2 years ago, the first time that has ever happened in the 27 years I've been in Sheridan District 2 is we went without a teacher. We had a machining teacher that we could not fill for a full year. That speaks a little bit to the quality and to the quantity of applicants out there. But even more specifically, when looking at our data back to 2016, we had 147 elementary teacher applicants. In 2025, we had 41, decrease of 72%. Secondary, junior high and high school, 350 applicants in 2016, 109 in 2025, down 69%. In 2016, we had 34 junior high science applicants. In 2024, 3, down 91%. We've seen a decrease, obviously, from those numbers, and it's not just a general anecdotal number. Those are real numbers. And why? I think that we've talked about some of the reasons why teachers are choosing not to go into the field or why they're not choosing to pursue that. I would say that certainly salaries is a part of that attracting. When we look back in 2016 and we compare to the current wages right now, there was a difference. And when we look back at the evidence-based model and we use the same math that was used in 2010, and we compare a like work group to nurses. So we'll use these specific numbers. So the average teacher salary in 2010 was $56,978. The evidence-based model generated $53,095 for the evidence-based model. A nurse's salary at the same time was $56,630, which is $348 less than an average teacher salary in 2010. If we use that same math and that same model and we project that then to 2024, currently right now, the Wyoming nurse's average salary is $88,020. We're recommending right now $70,561. If we use the same math, which is a 6.6% difference between the evidence-based model and the recommended teacher average salary, that number would generate $82,210. So there is a distinct difference between the $70,561 for an average teacher recommended salary to, if we use the same evidence-based model from 2010 to current, that number would generate $82,210. It does make a difference. Salaries make a difference. I would also say that this is an average, and we are far from average. We do things very, very well here, and education is one of those that we do a phenomenal job of educating our kids and daily making a difference. Our teachers take things home every weekend. Nurses take nothing home. Many nurses don't work 5 days a week. Quite frankly, most are 4 or 3 days a week. So when we're looking at comparative job categories, there is a difference. And there is a difference in what the nurses do compared to what teachers do. And I'm not diminishing what nurses do and the importance of that. But I would say that teachers make a daily difference, and they're worth every penny. And they work tirelessly to make a daily difference in the lives of our kids. So I appreciate the opportunity to share that information with you. I know this is a very difficult task, but our teachers and our education system in Wyoming is outstanding. And we want it to continue to be so. We appreciate your support. Thank you for that. And I would certainly stand for any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions? Senator McCune, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to push back a little on your comparison for nurses. My daughter's a nurse, and you're right, she only works 4 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, and then she's on call for 2 of the other days every other week. So even if she could take something home, she's hardly ever at home. And I'm not saying teachers aren't worth it, but I don't think I'd compare them to nurses in the light that you did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Nyman and then Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stoltz, it's been a long time since I've been able to say Mr. Stoltz. See, full disclosure, his dad was my ag advisor.
Okay.
And so say hi to mom and dad when you get a chance. I got to stop and see them. Probably one of the most important people in my life in education is Tom Stoltz, and so had a huge impact on me. Superintendent Stoltz, in my conversations that I've had off with educators, I was kind of shocked on multiple occasions that the number one issue for them was not salaries or the lack of wage. The number one issue that was related to me was a discipline problem in our schools that is de-incentivizing our educators to stay in the system. Could that, in your opinion, just asking for an opinion from a superintendent that does a really good job in the state, as I'm assuming and I have to believe all of our superintendents do their very best. I have heard over and over, it's not necessarily always wages, but I have heard consistently a discipline problem that is causing our teachers to struggle with trying to stay in the field. What has been your experience? And do you believe that is also a part of the dynamic that personally, I don't believe we can fix everything with money. And so I think we've got educators that are really having a hard time in many situations trying to continue to get excited about going to work when they've got other things. And I don't know if you can pay them enough to stay in some situations. That's why I'm curious. What do you see from your position of trying to hire people when you're talking to educators coming in? Is it really just about more wages will make this better, or are there other issues that we need to also factor into this in keeping our teachers and being able to have ample applicants?
Superintendent?
Chairman Heiner, through you, Representative Nyman, specific to Sheridan 2, we're not seeing that as an issue. That's not chasing teachers away. That is not preventing teachers from choosing to go into the field. We feel specifically the support that we need and that is necessary through legislation or the other opportunities that we have to provide specific consequences, specific expectations that we pre-teach, and all those things that are absolutely necessary to help kids understand what appropriate behavior needs to look like and be consistent in that. And we've seen a big change in that, in a positive, that we do have high expectations of our kids, and they do rise to that specific level. So we feel very strongly that it has nothing to do with discipline in our district. It absolutely does not. Certainly, we have occasional opportunities where there's going to be some discipline issues, but the support that our teachers and staff receive is second to none. It is specifically addressed, and those are learning opportunities for our students. And if it doesn't happen to choose to improve and get better, then there's other consequences that remove them from the opportunity to not allow other kids to learn in that specific classroom, because that is a right that all kids have and should have. And we specifically hold firm to exactly that. And you're right, money doesn't solve everything. And I'm not here to testify that that's absolutely the end-all be-all. I would say without doubt that that is absolutely a major driver. When we look at high school seniors that are choosing to pursue education, they look at salaries. And we've heard that testimony from Stoddard earlier, is regard to salaries do make a difference when you're choosing to pursue a career. That salary incentivizes our best and our brightest. And if we have teacher salaries that are very difficult for a teacher to make ends meet, that's probably not going to be a path they're going to choose. So salaries do in fact help incentivize and help to attract and retain teachers.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Stoltz. Appreciate it. You had some testimony of some very precipitous decreases in applicants. We heard testimony that the pipeline is drying up on us as well. The dates that you used I found curious because it really encompasses the pandemic. You also compared nursing to teaching. Nursing didn't really slow down during the pandemic. They were continuing to work. Teachers, it was a different situation. Would you ascribe any of the changes that you've seen in applicants to how we responded to the pandemic?
Chair Heiner, Representative Bear, when I look at the pandemic itself and specifically for the opportunities that we continue to provide our kids, and the opportunity that they got to basically learn through the pandemic and then be brought back into school physically the following year, unlike many other states, we didn't lose much ground. We certainly lost some ground, but we didn't lose much ground. I would say that certainly there has been a lot more scrutiny specific to educators in the broad stroke that is being painted in that there is indoctrination that is being provided in education, that there are specific opportunities where things are shared in classrooms that absolutely are untrue. And that is a testimony to the quality of teachers that we have, that provide an excellent education to students each and every day. I think that has dissuaded some of our teachers or some of our graduates from going into the field of education because of what transpired through the pandemic. How we handled that, I thought it was handled just fine in regards to getting our kids back physically that next fall. I thought that went extremely well. We have retained most of our teachers as a result of that. So I don't know that it has changed how we've dealt with that going forward, but I would say that it is a factor in regards to dissuading teachers from choosing that field, or candidates from choosing that particular field.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard testimony earlier from a teacher that in Sheridan 3, the starting salary is $48,000. I think it's considerably more in Sheridan 2. Can you just tell us, what the concept, what the thinking is in Sheridan 2 that you provide a higher starting salary, and what are the impacts, at least from what you know of Sheridan 3, as far as your ability to hire, your ability to retain, and why it might be different in Sheridan 2 than it is in Sheridan 3?
Sure. Chair Heiner, Representative Baer, certainly the size of the community is a big difference, without a doubt. As we know, rural communities, it's harder to attract teachers. There's no question about that. Certainly younger teachers, there's more opportunities in a larger community, albeit we're only 25,000 people. But yet at the same time, it does provide more opportunities for young teachers. Certainly we have a larger budget than District 3 naturally because of the number of ADM that we have, which generates a larger number. Our current base right now is 54,000. We increased the base from last year to this year by $3,000 because, again, we needed to provide an opportunity to recruit and attract and retain teachers. So that ECA, which we greatly appreciate, absolutely went to teacher salaries to improve and enhance the opportunity for our teachers to be able to, again, make more of a comparable wage. I think those are the reasons why it's easier, if you will, to attract teachers to District 2 than it is to District 3, just because of the opportunities for the young teachers specifically beyond the school day.
Any other questions? Representative Yin, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Superintendent, so I'm curious on how, I don't think we've had a successful recalibration since we added computer science to the basket of goods. So I'm curious on how difficult it is to hire teachers to teach computer science. And is it more difficult than your average teacher? And do you have to offer higher salaries for those specific specialties that are kind of harder to hire for? Maybe elucidate on what that looks like.
Certainly. Chair Heiner, through your Representative Yin, we do not pay an additional incentive for any of our teaching staff. There is a salary structure that we do follow. Yes, it is harder to find computer science teachers without a doubt. And I think as we know, when we look at the outside entity and industry or other jobs that are outside the school district, those salaries pay much, much more. So providing an IT department with the great skill set that they do have is certainly a challenge. And then to find those that are going to choose to teach that in our classrooms also makes it more difficult to attract teachers with that salary because it's not competitive with private business.
Any other questions? Superintendent Stoltz, you mentioned how important that ECA was that as a legislature passed this last session, 8.5% for all staff. How much of a raise did you give to the teachers in your district with that 8.5%?
Yeah. Representative Heiner, so specific to that, the information that was shared from LSO was 8.2%, is the percentage that we saw increase to our teachers. Our classified staff saw a 10% increase, and our special education, special ed paras saw a 17% increase.
And Superintendent, how much did you get?
I got 4%.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Committee, my name is Jerry Chase. I'm a part-time aide at Claremont School District in Sheridan County School District number 3. And the reason I'm here is because my boss asked if I'd come and provide information about what I do on a daily basis, since there were questions about what exactly an aide does. A little background, grew up in Big Piney, Wyoming, went to University of Wyoming, got a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degree. 15 years as a band director, 10 years as a principal, 11 years as a superintendent. So being a part-time aide, you may wonder why am I doing that? And so just a little context behind that. In the fall, in August, I got a call from the superintendent in Sheridan number 3 saying, hey, I know you're not working and we haven't found a band director. Can you come and teach? And I said, well, I'm really not that interested. And so I said no. And then I thought about it overnight and I said, you know what? I think I'm gonna apply for that. And I did. And a year went by, they didn't find anybody. 2 years went by, 3 years went by, 6 years later, we found a music teacher and I quit being the band director out there. But what I found in that district is it's special. Claremont School District number 3, I refer to it as the only K-12 alternative school in the state of Wyoming. We serve students from 5 districts and 3 counties because it is a special place. So it was a little bit bittersweet to give up my music teaching job and then not have some interaction. So I talked to my superintendent and said, hey, what do you think about this rover position? I'll come in and I'll be an aide and I'll help out where it needs to be helped. And if I see a need, I'll fill it. I said, I thought, when I was a superintendent, I thought it'd be nice to have someone like that to help out. And he said, I'm all for it, we'll sign you up. So my day starts in the morning, kids get off the bus, they go out to the playground, I greet them, make sure they're doing okay. Sometimes their cat dies. Sometimes, they're still dirty from chores. They got dirt on their fingernails and green stuff on their boots. We make sure they're clean before they walk in the hallways. Then I work with first grade students. The teacher works with half the class on the ones that are behind on the reading, and I work with the other half of the class that are ahead, and I just keep moving them forward with their reading, writing, and discussing, and that's what we do. We read, we write about it, and then we discuss what we've read and wrote about. Then the next thing I do is, let's see, caught me off guard here. So first grade, I come back, I work with 6th grade math. So just in the classroom with students, helping facilitate that instruction. And, they're at different levels. So it depends on that day. The teacher might be working with students that are behind now, and I'll advance the kids ahead, or I might take a few kids that are behind on some concepts and bring them forward with the rest of the class. Then I have lunch duty, I have recess duty. And then after recess, we have lunch, and I help the little kids out with their milk cartons, open their catch packets, help clean up their spills. There's always spills. And I help them clean that up, and they all know how to use a mop in a room and do those things. Then after lunch, I work with a 7th grade student who moved in. His math skills are at grade level except in fractions. He's had no work in fractions whatsoever. So I spend 50 minutes with him every day on the operations of fractions. And he's getting caught up. I think by the semester, he'll be back in the regular classroom with that. After that, then I do afternoon recess out on the playground with the kids, just to make sure things are safe and orderly, and you develop positive relationships with the kids. They share all kinds of stuff with you about their day and what's going on. And in turn, I can help staff understand too, that free play time at recess is really important for them. And they're very creative, and I got stories, but I won't share any right now.
Mr. Chase, thank you very much, but we're talking about salaries.
Right, okay. Sorry, I went to mumble on about that. So our district, our mission is to graduate informed, confident, responsible, and skilled students. In order to do that, we need informed, confident, responsible, and skilled adults. And in order to find those people, you need to pay them a competitive salary, whether it's an aide, whether it's a teacher, administrator, maintenance worker. So that's what I have to say about salaries. I'll piggytail on what Scott said here a few minutes ago. For decades, Wyoming has led the nation with the NAEP report card, not only with their scale score, but especially with their achievement gap between economically disadvantaged students and non-economically disadvantaged students. And the reason I'm convinced the reason we've done that is because we've had quality people working with our students in the state of Wyoming. When you have one or no applicants for positions that you're trying to fill, compared to 10, 15 years ago when you had 30, 50, 80 applicants for a position, that quality of that pool is going to be down. And so those scores will reflect that down the road. It's not going to happen right away because we still have effective teachers in the classroom. But over time, that's going to diminish, and that privilege, that honor that our students have enjoyed over these years is going to slowly erode away. So we must pay our folks well, and we need to pay them well to find them and to get them here and keep them here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chase. Any questions? Start down here, Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you tell us, and I understand if you say no, but how much are you paid hourly for that aide position?
To be honest with you, I don't know. It doesn't matter to me, but I'm in a unique position. I'm taking advantage of the Wyoming Rehire program. So I would say that the benefits to me to working in that district are better than what I'm giving to the district. Things are better for me than for them at this point.
Follow up.
Thank you. Superintendent Stultz, starting para in District 2, what does that pay?
I'd have to look it up. I can get that to you.
Okay. Just for the record, I'd like to say that typically when I see these jobs posted, you can make more making sandwiches at Subway.
All right. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, I wrote it down. Mr. Chase, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate that story that you shared with us. I think Piedmont or Claremont, I'm sorry, is very blessed to have you as a PhD in that position. That's wonderful that you're willing to do that. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your career. You mentioned that you were in a school district working in the state before. You're on the rehire program. What age were you able to retire, and what were you being paid back then?
Mr. Chase.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, I retired at age 53 and a superintendent's salary of around $155,000.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Any other questions for Mr. Chase? Thank you very much. Mr. Schultz, Superintendent Stultz.
Yes, Chair Heiner, to you, Representative Kelly, 1597.
Representative Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, just to reiterate that, entry-level jobs at places like Walmart, McDonald's are $17, $18 an hour in Sheridan.
Thank you. All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Heiner. Chase Christensen, Superintendent, Sheridan County number 3. I just wanted to answer Representative Kelly's question if I had an opportunity. At our district, and this isn't specific to Dr. Chase, but for our district, a base pay for a para is $15 an hour, and we've been able to increase that over the past couple of years. It is, you heard testimony earlier, teachers making $48,900. It's about $3,000, $3,500 more than what the model is providing for a teacher in a similar spot. So we're working hard to do that. Representative Bear, you had questions earlier about health insurance. We've been working hard. We keep our employee contribution for health insurance at 10%, except for single policies. Single policies are covered at 100% by the district. After that, the employee is expected to contribute 10. And part of the reason that we are not with the state plan, a question you asked earlier was, we did a full comparison last year. And honestly, when I did that, I expected to find that the state plan was the cheapest and it was going to be the way to go. You heard testimony both from your consultant, Mr. Pikus, as well as LSO last time we were here around all 3 insurance plans. We compared all 3 of those in addition to some more and found that our plan was the place to be. One of the reasons you haven't heard today that was for that is that the state plan requires you to enroll all of your employees regardless of if they take health insurance or not. Some districts in the state are at near 100% of their employees utilizing their health insurance. Our district is not quite there. So our health insurance, and this is where the block grant is amazing, we are able to utilize that to increase salaries for our teachers when we're not having to utilize that for health insurance because we have people that aren't taking that health insurance. So we do benefit from block grant, and with that, Chairman Heiner, I'd take any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions? Representative Bear, please.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Just one quick question, and it was mentioned earlier about the part-time employees not having to be on the insurance policy. They would be on the state policy. Do you have in your district part-time employees that are not in your insurance program?
Yeah, I think, sorry, Chairman Heiner, Representative Bear. We've got part-time employees that aren't part of the insurance plan because they don't qualify under our policy with regard to that. But in addition to that, we have employees that do qualify for our health insurance plans that choose not to take it. And those are the employees specifically that under the state plan, if I've got an employee that is a full-time teacher and they choose to take the insurance policy that's provided by their spouse's work, maybe because it's better for their family, I would still be required to pay, I think, $932 to the state plan for that employee, regardless of them getting a benefit or not.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, as a committee, discussed, the opportunity to actually give that additional dollars back to the employee for making that choice, because it's obviously saving the state. How would you feel about that if we gave them, some additional incentive because they did not take the insurance program?
Chairman Heiner, Representative Bear, I appreciate the question. I've got a master's degree in finance. It's my background. I worked in investment management, came to education later in a career. And I often, maybe too often in education, look at where dollars are causing value than I should. And that's a spot I would say up until when I made that comparison last year, I was right there with you. The issue is, and when we start to incentivize not taking the health plan, what we're really doing is changing our pool and changing the structure of that pool. So I think the furthest we could go, I thought not too long ago about moving some of our employees to a program that's provided by a company called New Health. And they offer a structure that many of these faith-based insurance providers do. They're just not faith-based. But it's kind of a pay in and then you're paying for each other plan rather than a true insurance. They don't have to cover pre-existing conditions. There are some other things, but it makes sense for a lot of people to be in a plan of that nature. The problem, if we move more employees to that, or if we have more employees not take our health insurance plan, it just increases the risk of the rest of our pool. And what's going to happen is our insurance company is going to come and they're going to say, even though you have less people taking your plan, we're going to spend just as much serving you. So we're going to charge you the same amount of money, whether we're serving 30 people or we're serving 15.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on the point about the state plan requiring everyone to be enrolled. I just don't think that's accurate. If you, I mean, you do have to enroll all employees that are over 20 hours, but if you have, or you have to offer it, excuse me, not necessarily enroll them, but you have to provide that opportunity. If they decline because their spouse is on a different plan that's a better plan, something along those lines, there's no obligation to enroll them and pay for them through the state's EGI plan. So I might be misunderstanding what you're saying. 20 hours versus 30 hours is a real thing, but that other aspect, I just don't think that's accurate.
Representative Heiner, Senator Rothfuss, that's not from me. That's what LSO and your consultants told you last time we were sitting here. And that's exactly how the state plan was presented, is that if there are employees.
Sorry to interrupt. I just went over.
Let's get clarification.
I just went over and double checked.
Mr. Wilmarth, will you clarify that, please?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's not our testimony. The state plan is offered. There's open enrollment. Employees can partake or not partake. That's their choice. So if they do not participate, it's not a cost to the state.
All right, Mr. Christensen? All right, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Superintendent Christensen, I'm curious how many of your employees commute from Sheridan, the city of Sheridan, and does that play a part in people's decision-making on where they apply and where they work within Sheridan County?
Representative Heiner, Representative Yin, thank you for the question. I've got, including myself, I've got 5 employees that commute from Sheridan to Claremont to work every day. I've got another 6 that commute from Buffalo to Claremont to work every day. And I've got a couple employees that are coming out of Campbell County to Claremont to work every day. Ms. McConnell spoke earlier to the number that we've got living in Claremont. The vast majority of those are living in employee housing that the district's been able to secure. It really is a lack of housing that keeps people from being there. You know, Superintendent Stoltz spoke to a lot of the reasons that people choose to live in a community like Sheridan or Buffalo rather than Claremont. And I think that the great thing that we've got going in Sheridan County, Johnston County, is that both for our families as well as our employees, they can choose whichever of those is the best place for them to live, and they can choose whichever of those is the best place to work. I would use as an example, I have some students that attend Sheridan County School District 3. Their family lives in Sheridan County School District 2. One of their parents works at Sheridan College. One of their parents works for Sheridan County School District number 1. And we have what I would say is the best choice in education for families of anywhere in the nation, and it's all public.
All right, any other questions? Superintendent Christensen, with the 8% ECA raise, how much was passed to the teachers? How much of a raise did the teachers get this past year?
Chairman Heiner, thank you for the question. I think LSO calculated that to be 3.8% for our teachers. What they failed to take into consideration is that our board provided a one-time bonus payment to our teachers of 4.5% of their salary. Taking that into consideration, it gets it to about 8.3. We've been working hard to move that base salary over the past few years. And another important place I'd like to say is that while the 8.5% one-time ECA this last year was important, we'd been bumping our base year over year over year over year to just try to stay competitive with districts around us. And that 8.5% brought the model salary closer to what we have been pushing our base over the top of that. Again, you heard earlier, our base is $48,000. The base in the model is $44,150.
And what kind of a raise did you get as a superintendent?
I get the same as what teachers get.
So you got the 3%?
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned you own some housing, that you subsidize housing. What is the rent on those housing that you provide for employees?
Sir, the ones that we're able to provide for employees, we charge $450 a month for the larger houses and $350 a month for the smaller ones.
So you have, I assume, 2 or 3 bedroom homes that you're renting for $450 a month?
Yeah, some 3-bedroom homes and some are 1 and 2 bedrooms.
So how does that go into a compensation package when you provide housing like that? Is that calculated? How do you decide who gets that subsidized housing and who doesn't?
Yeah, so a couple of years after I was hired, we instituted a policy that has an ability for our district to make sure that housing can be utilized for new hires. So if we have a new teacher coming into the district that is going to be serving our school and we need a house, we've got a function that we can end up moving somebody out. But until we need a house, the people that have been in it have access to that. I think right now we've got about the proper mix for where our employees are at, because I think our employees are self-select in Sheridan, they're self-select in Buffalo, and I haven't necessarily had requests for that employee housing. But if it is such, it's intended for recruitment. It's not necessarily a retention mechanism. What I'd really like to be able to do is make sure that housing is helping us get a teacher to tenure, right? Where they're comfortable in the fact that they're going to be able to maintain in the district and they can buy a place. But as you heard testified earlier, in order for a teacher to buy a place anywhere around us, they're going to need an increased salary.
So the additional benefits not only include your base wage of $50,000, but subsidized housing that could be $2,000, $2,500 a month. So that base wages with the benefits grows tremendously with subsidized housing, does it not?
I agree with the principle there, Representative Heiner. $2,500 a month would get you a fairly nice place in Claremont, Wyoming. I don't know that anywhere's rent for that.
And I don't know what that renting.
Last market rate I saw, and one of our teachers is renting outside of what our district provided housing is right now, because we're waiting 1 year to be able to provide her some employee housing. The market rent that she's paying right now is $950 for a 3-bedroom place.
Okay, thank you. Representative Nyman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Christensen, I think you kind of answered some of it. I guess my question was, as I'm thinking about this, as you're explaining, the stipend basically for allowing them housing, can you see where that would be a potential problem in some communities where if the school district is going to, offer that as a rent, as a part of a pay package, it would de-incentivize others, if rent in that community is 9.5 and the school district will rent, these folks houses for $350 to $450, can that be part of why we have some struggle with housing and folks trying to justify the input costs of creating homes for rent in a community like that and that small? Or, and that's what the other question I had was, what is rent, in that community? And does that kind of keep the rent tamped down when folks would be a little less interested in renting because it's just cheaper for the district to do it? And the other question I would have, were these homes that the district purchased or were these homes that the district built, or it's different in different communities? How did these homes come into being?
Through you, Chairman Heiner, Representative Nyman. We talked about market rent in the district, and anytime that an employer is providing a sub-market rent to an employee, that there's a tax consequence to that. So our employees end up paying for that on the side of taxes rather than in compensation. And it is a part of compensation package, correct? I would agree, I think, with where the general consensus is going. We need to work to get our rents a little bit closer to the market rate. Quite honestly, we couldn't establish a market rate prior to this summer because there weren't other rentals really in the town of Claremont. So now that we have a model for what a market rate may be, we'll probably have to make some adjustments with regard to what we're charging. I think prior to that, the argument could be made that we were charging a market rent. As to the question of if that's driving market rates down, I think you could ask some of the other superintendents. We're not the only one in the state that provides district housing, but it's a constant push. So you've got to keep that rate right in line with where the market is, right? Because otherwise you're causing a tax consequence to your employee that they've got a low salary already, and then they're going to get a tax bill at the end of the year that they don't really have the cash in hand to pay. So I think it's important. I mean, we do provide district housing. It's part of recruitment, but we've got to make sure that it's in the neighborhood of that market rate. Otherwise, we're just hurting our employees at the end of a year.
All right, Senator McCune.
I guess I'm a bit confused. If we're going to charge market rate, do we now have school districts in the real estate and property management business? If we're charging market rate, who's gaining anything? Or are we monkeying with the fair economy? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Superintendent Christensen.
Representative Heiner, through you to Senator McCune. I think the fact, you could ask most districts, I think the intention of having district housing is not necessarily to provide a sub-market rate to employees. It is to make sure that there is a house available for an employee when they're hired. It's a recruitment necessity to make sure that there's an empty house that's available to rent, that's of a certain quality that a teacher may want to move into, bring a family into when they come to teach for the district.
Follow-up, Senator?
So if you didn't have the houses and they were just on the free market economy, would they all fill up in Claremont? Or would they still be available?
Through you, Representative Heiner, to Senator McCune, having heard your question, I understand I left one unanswered for Representative Nyman with regard to how those houses got there. I think initially the district, it's my understanding, was able to purchase some property and then bring in some modular homes, bring in some mobile homes to establish that employee housing. It's not part of the housing stock that would necessarily have existed in Claremont. There isn't, right now, there isn't development within Claremont. We're actually, in no other way would I say this, but in this instance, I think we're very similar to Jackson with regard to real estate, in that they're pinned in by public land, we're pinned in by private landowners. There's nowhere to put a house.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony, Superintendent.
Thank you, Representative Hunter.
Yes, Representative Kiner. My name is Mike Hamill. I'm superintendent with Carbon County School District Number 1 in Rollins and Baggs. And just wanted to offer a few things after I had not prepared comments for today, but in the course of listening to the dialogue and listening to the comments, had some thoughts to offer. One, the teacher shortage that we're experiencing has been predicted for over a decade. This is not something that came about because of the pandemic. This is known. We knew this was coming for many years. It's just that it has arrived, and it has combined itself with a large change in our economy in terms of increased wages. So you have a situation where you have competitive situations, competitive other jobs whose wages are outpacing the increase in education at a time when we are facing a national teacher shortage. That's the short of what's happening. And if I go back to Dr. Stoddard's comments, that quality teachers make a huge difference. And we've known that for years, and that's absolutely where the education that you've heard about with the testimony from the parents and testimony from other people, that's where the rubber hits the road. So we have a unique situation where we have a national teacher shortage at a time when wages are escalating, and an opportunity to try to address that for the benefit of our kids. I also thought about one of the comments that very, very respectfully was offered, that sometimes throwing money at something doesn't change it. And I remember a comment to me early in my teaching career. By the way, I am a Wyoming public school graduate, Green River High School, graduated from the University of Wyoming, taught and coached for 8.5 years before I went into administration. While I was teaching and coaching, worked as a bellman, worked as a wacky packer operator in the pipelines north of Rollins, delivered UPS packages, did those things for summer jobs to try to make sure we could make ends meet and those kinds of things. But I remember Dr. Heslop, who retired many years ago from Campbell County School District in Gillette, offered to me, money doesn't solve a lot of problems, but lack of money sure does create a lot. And I'd offer you to consider that as you're contemplating the need to drastically increase wages for our professional educators in the state of Wyoming. I'd happily stand for any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions for Superintendent Hamill? Superintendent, with the ECA we had last year, what kind of raise did you give your teachers, and what kind of a raise did you get?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that more comprehensively. When I started as superintendent, the base pay in Carbon number 1 was $43,500. Our base pay now is $53,000. That's an increase of 22%. That far outpaces any of the ECA that we've received cumulatively over that time from the legislature. More specifically, because we had really put ourselves out over our skis to try to be able to recruit teachers effectively to Carbon 1. And I'll get to your question specifically here in just a moment. The hiring environment in Wyoming right now is absolutely the toughest I have ever seen in my career, and that's 31 years in administration. I was a principal in Green River before the Campbell decisions, when Wyoming was 44th, 45th, 46th, something like that in national teacher pay, and it was hard to round up an applicant. The situation today is much more dire than it was 31 years ago when I was faced with that situation. We have multiple teachers on exception authorizations in Carbon 1, where we used to have none. That's not uncommon around the state. So to get to your question, we had given a very significant raise 2 years prior to the ECA is starting to come. We had given a $5,000 raise in an attempt to try to be competitive. This last year, we needed to kind of balance some things out a little bit. We may have gotten over our skis a little bit, so the ECA this year was not used for as large a raise as we had given previously. And so when you look at that chart, you'll see Carbon One a little bit less. My pay was exactly.
What was that number?
We went from 52.5 to 53,000, and people were allowed to move on the salary schedule.
What
So
percentage was that, Superintendent?
I don't know what that percentage is in my head. Roughly speaking, it's about when you factor in being able to move on the salary schedule and what we did for them on the insurance as well, it was roughly about a 3% raise. That probably doesn't show on that sheet, but it was about a 3% raise.
It shows about a 1%.
There you go. But this sheet doesn't take into consideration that people moved on the salary schedule or adjustments made for insurance, okay? And my percentage was identical to our teaching staff.
Okay, thank you. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent. I'm glad you mentioned the situations we're having to make the exception requests. I kind of wondered, are some of those folks, I know it's early because we're seeing obviously the shortages with teachers, are some of them sticking around once they get their degrees, or are you seeing a trend there?
So we have made a concerted, intentional effort to try to grow some of our own. When you saw the things that Dr. Stoddard shared about the growth in the Western Governors situation, some of our folks, while they are working as support staff, we've maybe identified some people that we think show particular promise and are supporting them through tuition reimbursement to try to get their teaching degree. And we maybe are hiring them on exception authorization while they're in the process of trying to finish that up. So we've had to be creative in that way.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hamill.
Thank you.
We'll now go online. Ashley, how many people have their hands raised?
Mr. Chairman, only one has their hand up.
Okay, will you bring them online, please?
Absolutely. I am bringing Katie Christopherson into the room.
Katie, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Please state your name
Chairman.
and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Katie Christopherson. I'm a parent in Laramie County School District Number 1, and I'm here today representing what sometimes feels like a minority of parents who support public education. Although I do not believe that that's actually the case, I felt like it would be beneficial to add some thoughts from a parent for your consideration in this recalibration discussion. I currently live in Laramie County, but I've also lived in Albany, Fremont, Natrona, and Campbell counties. My family has deep roots in Wyoming. My great-grandfather served in the state legislature, and I have family spread throughout the state. My husband and I chose to live in Wyoming because of the opportunities here and wanting to raise our children in Wyoming. I have 4 children who span from elementary to high school, and I try to do what I can to be involved in the schools, not only for my kids and all students, but to appreciate and support teachers and staff members. I've been lucky to get to meet and interact and create relationships with several principals involved, and I also serve as a parent representative on our district parent advisory committee, where our superintendent, Dr. Newton, attends and gives reports regularly. I know that he's always a phone call away or email away when I have a question or concern. I have many family members who have or still work in public education in Wyoming. Earlier this month, I attended the professional judgment panel in Laramie, and all the school administrators who were there, along with Dr. Pikus and Dr. Brown, were very gracious, informative, and helpful in their explanations. I can tell there's a lot of experience, expertise, and thought and work put into their research and recommendations. The concerns and thoughts I have as a parent connected to this work that I prepared to speak to are in regards to teacher compensation and food service funding, which I will save that for the appropriate time later. In listening to several districts at the professional judgment panel and in listening to the presenters and commenters today, I think it speaks volumes that districts are needing to pay an average teacher salary that is higher than the model the state has adopted in the past. Even moving forward with an increase, whether that is the recommendation of the 70,000 weighted average salary, or if if it should be the base salary like others have spoken to. I think we have some dire circumstances. If there is only one district utilizing the state insurance plan, there must be a reason at the district level as to why they aren't, and I'm glad that some of the districts have spoken to that. After hearing Dr. Stoddard's presentation, I hope there would be a bit more anecdotal research considered from the professional judgment panels, the public comments, or direct conversations with district administrators and principals, similar to what Superintendent Schultz and others have now shared. I graduated with my elementary ed degree in 2010, but decided not to pursue teaching and wouldn't do so now, even with the current teaching license. I'm fortunate enough not to need to. Like Superintendent Schultz showed, districts have the data of how many applicants they get and who is leaving and what positions are hard or harder to fill. I do believe that we all, parents included, should be very concerned about this. While I know the legislator is not able to directly recruit teachers, I believe your work surrounding this recalibration and salary discussion will directly affect how districts will be able to compete and to continue to hire the best teachers and other staff. Our students need you to be proactive in your approach with this. The struggle will not be going away anytime soon, and districts are having to be more and more creative based on the pool of applicants that they get, even hiring teachers who may not have gotten an interview in the past. In closing, I would like to reiterate that your decisions regarding this recalibration and school funding as a whole will directly affect students. If we want Wyoming to be an attractive place to live and work, we need to invest in our schools, including those who spend each day with students. If we want Wyoming students to stay or come back to Wyoming, we need to incentivize them with a competitive salary based on the specific struggles to Wyoming. In the next 5 years, with projected declining enrollment and potentially facing funding cliffs, students, teachers, and districts need a more proactive process and increase in salary. It is my opinion that school districts and teachers are highly compliant beings who typically refuse to do things at half effort. They continue to give their all even when more and more expectations are put on them by parents, communities, and state agencies. Frankly, right now it seems like the legislator has put them in a bind, and in the trickle down, Wyoming students deserve better. The people who know this stuff inside and out are the district administrators who face the reality of producing better outcomes, knowing that if things need to be cut, the cuts will be felt deeply by students and families. If not already being felt, it will be soon. I would encourage the committee to reach out to the administrators and superintendents. Please listen to them, as they are the experts who live and breathe it day in and day out. As a parent, I trust them, and I think this committee and other state legislators should too. Thank you for your time and your commitment to Wyoming students. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Christofferson. Appreciate your time to be in attendance here virtually. Any questions, committee, for Ms. Christofferson? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Ashley, anyone else online?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, we'll close public testimony on this section of our agenda, and we will recess for lunch until 2 o'clock. That's